The lone rider crested the rise beneath a bruised sky, the ragged banners of twilight trembling above the pale expanse of the wolfswood. Jon Snow drew in the chill air scented with pine and the musk of damp earth, every breath sharpening the countless edges of anticipation coursing through him. Ghost padded at his side, the great white direwolf as silent as snowfall, crimson eyes narrowing on the distant low lights glittering at Winterfell's walls. Home? Yet not. A Stark's ancestral bastion, yet it lay in the clenched hands of Bolton usurpers, their flayed man banners a crimson mockery, fluttering where proud grey Direwolves should have flown. Another gust carried with it the faint echo of hammers and distant shouts from within those walls. Preparations for war, or perhaps for new torments visited upon the North's battered people. Jon's knuckles whitened around the pommel of Longclaw. He shut his eyes, recalling the weight of Maester Aemon's final words at Castle Black. The old bear's counsel, his father's steady voice in the Godswood, of Winterfell long ago, voices that urged mercy and warned of arrogance. But other voices pushed back. Ygritte dying in his arms beneath the wall, the screams at Hardhome, the stench of burning corpses after the Battle of the Wall, Sansa's whispered horrors of Ramsay's cruelty. His own blood pounded harder. Today he was no longer the quiet watcher at the margin. Today snow and shadow would roll like thunder over these lands, wielding tooth and steel in equal measure. Beyond him, the tree line rippled as forms emerged. Low, powerful, each step heavy with instinctive purpose. Direwolves. Not merely Ghost, whose devotion had followed Jon from the day they first locked eyes on the King Road, but a pack of the ancient North reborn. At his summons, Ghost had ranged far through forgotten vales, across lonely mountains, and into myth-shadowed glens, gathering together the scattered remnants of a legendary line. Only a handful of men alive had beheld even one of these beasts. Now a dozen gray shapes trotted into view, flanks mottled, pelts bristling in the half-light, eyes gleaming gold and red. Among them moved Nymeria herself, Arya's lost companion, grown massive as a small horse. Behind her loped others, ash-coated Fang, one pale as hoarfrost dubbed Thrime, another night-black save for a single silver stripe down her spine. At their heels hustled smaller wolves, mere yearlings whose uncertain steps belied their lethal potential. And still beyond, deeper in the forest, more shapes stirred. The swelling chord of a direwolf army awaiting the note to break upon Winterfell's stones. Jon guided his black courser downslope. The horse snorted, ears twitching at the unnatural assembly of predators, yet Ghost's presence calmed the mount, and the bond between Direwolves and Stark blood soothed the ripples of fear. Jon's half-brothers of the Night's Watch would have called it sorcery. The Ironborn might whisper of skin-changers. To Jon, it was kinship, the old gods answering a silent vow. A wind sighed through the pines, scattering needles like dark confetti. The Direwolves lowered their heads as if communing with something older than wind, older than men. Jon pressed a gloved palm to Ghost's ruff, met the albino's gaze, and felt the stirring within him, an echo of the beast's own perception. Scent trails, heartbeats, the very hum of life and stone. Winterfell thrummed like a captive drum. In its cellars, a weirwood's pale roots strained to taste the free air. In its courtyards, blades clanged. Men laughed too loudly to smother dread. Ravens perched uneasily on crenellations, as though sensing a predator yet unseen. Jon urged his mount forward. At the tree line waited a ring of figures cloaked in charcoal wool, mail glinting beneath. Lady Mormont sat erect upon a shaggy garron, her youth eclipsed by the fury in her green eyes. To her left loomed Tormund Giantsbane, astride a shag-coated elk, red beard tangled to his chest. He grinned when he saw Jon approach, though worry furrowed his brow. Davos Seaworth, stern and watchful, tightened his cloak against the cold, one gloved hand brushing the carved stag talisman at his neck. Behind them, spear carriers from Bear Island stood shoulder to shoulder with wildlings draped in furs, black brothers who had sworn again to stand by the man they named king in the north, and free riders drawn by tales of Stark sons risen from death. All stared with reverent fear at the Direwolves threading between their horses. Jon dismounted. The Boltons reinforced tonight, Davos murmured, nodding toward the flickering torches on the distant ramparts. Scouts say they burn the rest of the North's harvest stores, punishment for imagined treacheries. By morning, children will starve in the village. Then we do not wait for morning, Jon said. Tormund cracked his knuckles. I like this plan better than your last one, Crow. It will cost blood, Jon warned. Perhaps half of what remains of our strength. Better our blood than theirs, Lady Mormont answered, her voice sharp as new-forged steel. House Mormont stands with House Stark. Winterfell must be freed tonight. Jon surveyed the faces, a tapestry of fear, resolve, and raw desperation. He had returned from death with memories of darkness beyond the black, tasting the futility of mortal schemes against cosmic indifference. Yet here, among these mortal hearts, purpose blazed bright enough to rival any god's flame. He raised Longclaw, and in its Valyrian steel, the dying light fractured into a cold star. For Eddard Stark, he said, quiet yet carrying. For the North. For every child who dreams of summer. Ghost tilted back his head and howled, a clarion note shivering the twilight. Nymeria joined, deeper and older, soon answered by a chorus that rolled through the forest, like thunder chasing lightning. Men shivered, horses stamped. In Winterfell's yards, dogs barked and broke their chains, scattering in panic. Jon swung astride his horse. He felt the direwolves surge forward beside him, their pace a ground-eating lope. Around him the ragged coalition fell into motion, a living tide sweeping from the pines. Ramsay Bolton lounged upon a curtained dais in the great hall, boots propped on a lacquered chest, emblazoned with flayed prisoners, savoring a goblet of arbor red while Miranda tuned a lute by the hearth. The girl's trembling fingers plucked hapless strings. Each sour note amused him more. On the rush-covered floor, a kennel-master knelt wordlessly, arms stretched overhead to hold Ramsay's sigil banner aloft until his shoulders shook. A squire burst through the doors, panting. "My lord." Ramsay slipped a dagger from his belt, twirling it. "If this is another wildling rumor, I will peel your tongue. And no, my lord. We sighted riders in the Wolfswood, a host approaching under no banners." Ramsay sat up, eyes brightening. "How many?" "At least 200. And wolves, my lord. Dozens of them." Miranda's lute twanged discordantly. Ramsay's grin widened. "Wolves? Good." "I was bored." He rose, cloak drifting like pooled blood along his shoulders. "Rouse the men, archers on the battlements. Send word to my kennel masters. Perhaps our hounds may enjoy a hunt." He flicked the dagger. "And release the prisoners from the cells. I relish the chaos of terrified fools underfoot." As the squire fled, Ramsay inhaled, savoring the coppery taste of imminent sport. He strode to the window slit and peered into the gloom. Across the snow-dusted hills flickered the faint glimmer of torches, scattered lines weaving toward Winterfell like serpents of flame. High above, clouds tore open, unveiling a ghostly moon. In its pallid light he saw them, hulking shapes coursing over the drifts, moving faster than any warhorse. Wolves, but monstrously large, shadows of stories told by wet nurses to scare children. Ramsay's lips peeled wider. "Father always said the North remembers," he whispered to himself. "Let them remember my song of flayed wolves." He turned, snapping for his reek. But the wretched creature was gone, dead on a pyre weeks past. Ramsay's grin faltered. No matter. He still had terror to inspire. Snow scattered in swirls against Winterfell's outer wall as Jon dismounted beneath the looming gatehouse. Above, arrows hissed from narrow crenels, but the direwolves moved with uncanny ebb, slipping through arrow shadow and whirlwind alike. Ghost's jaws closed on a bowman who leaned too far. The man vanished in a silent yelp, dragged screaming from the parapet. Nymeria barreled headlong into the oak gates, her weight rattling iron bolts as though struck by a battering ram. Wood splintered. Grey Fang and Thrime joined, thick skulls crashing. Jon's men surged forward, shoulders braced behind an improvised ram of pine trunks sheathed in rawhide. Each thunderous impact reverberated with the wolves' snarls and the roars of free folk. On the battlement's crossbow string snapped, but panic ruptured discipline. The monstrous wolves were nightmares given flesh, and fear rotted courage faster than steel. Jon drove his ram again. A hinge groaned, split. Then the right-hand gate buckled inward with a crack like splitting ice. Wolves streamed through the breach. Jon strode in their wake, longclaw flashing. A Bolton pikeman lunged. Jon parried, swept low, and hamstrung the man. Another thrusted Jon's exposed flank, but Ghost launched sideways, smashing the pikeman to the earth. Tormund stormed past howling, swinging a great axe that cleaved mail and flesh alike. Arrows whistled. One struck Jon's pauldron and ricocheted, jarring his arm. He saw Lady Mormont leap from her saddle upon the ramp and land, astride a dismayed spearman, dirk flashing. The child moved with lethal surety born of bears, blood, and grief. Within the courtyard chaos bloomed. Fires spilled from overturned braziers, casting lunatic shadows. Wolves herded frantic soldiers, hamstringing some, forcing others stumbling toward the inner ward, where Jon's second group breached the postern under Devas' command. Jon pushed toward the keep, heart battering his ribs. Around him Snow and Stark fought side by side, two halves of his soul finally reconciled. A black-armored Bolton knight made to intercept. Jon ducked the swing, slammed his pommel into the visor, then opened the man's throat with a swift downward cut. Blood sprayed hot against Snow. Inside the great hall, Ramsay gathered his elite guard before the carved doors. Torches spat. He wore studded leather dyed pinkish red, matching the banners overhead. Twin daggers glimmered in his hands. When the first Direwolf barreled through, a rangy gray with one ear torn, Ramsay sidestepped and drove a blade under its ribs, a whirl of grace and savagery. The Direwolf yelped, staggered, still snapped at him. Ramsay laughed. "You're not so frightful up close," he hissed, yanking the second knife free and carving across the beast's throat. Warm blood sheeted his sleeves. The wolf collapsed, twitching. Ramsay turned to the next and the next, dancing, knives flickering like twin tongues of silver flame. 3 fell before their momentum overcame his footwork. A massive white shape vaulted the corpses, Ghost. Ramsay's smile widened at the challenge. "Come then, Stark's pup." Ghost lunged. Ramsay pivoted, but misjudged the albino's speed. Fangs closed on his forearm, crushing bone. Ramsay shrieked, stabbing frantically. One blade struck Ghost's flank, but the Direwolf's jaws tore the dagger loose along with a thick strip of flesh. Guards rushed. Ghost released and whirled, forcing them back. Ramsay retreated, panting, blood pulsing through his ruined arm. No longer did he grin. Then the doors burst inward. Jon strode through firelit gloom. He took in the dead wolves, the wounded Ghost, Ramsay's crimson-soaked leathers, and something inside him stilled. Snow. Ramsay spat, brandishing his uninjured blade. Bastard of bastards. Jon advanced without answering. The knives flickered. Jon parried one, deflected the other off his vambrace, then drove a boot to Ramsay's knee. Bone cracked. Ramsay crumpled, howl strangled in his throat. Jon disarmed him with 2 precise cuts. Longclaw's point hovered at the man's throat. Around them, his own followers spilled in, weapons drawn, ghosts of old vengeance breathing down their necks. Yet Jon's attention never strayed from the quivering man before him, this architect of so many nightmares. Ramsay's eyes darted to Ghost, to the wolves stalking through the shattered doorway, muzzles red with battle. "I am Lord of Winterfell," he gasped through clenched teeth. "You cannot." Jon spoke, voice low, roughened by ash and memory. "You are no lord. You are sentence." He lifted Longclaw. Raging satisfaction clamored within him, but beneath that, another sensation. Dread's echo, whispering of the abyss he had walked beyond death. He hesitated. Justice or vengeance? The blade wavered. Ghost growled, and Jon felt the weight of every northern voice calling out for deliverance. Honor without action was smoke. With one swift motion, he plunged Longclaw through Ramsay's chest. The usurper's sputtered breath misted the air. Jon held his gaze until the light bled out. Silence washed the hall. The flames crackled. Melted snow dripped from broken shutters. Jon withdrew his sword, wiped it on Ramsay's cloak, then knelt beside the direwolf he had failed to outpace. The gray female's flank still rose and fell, though her breathing shuddered. Jon pressed a hand to her head until her eyes closed peacefully. Outside, the clash of arms ebbed. Tormund appeared in the doorway, blood dusting his beard. "Bolton banners fall, Crow," he said, voice reverent. "Winterfell is ours." Jon stood. "Not ours. The North's." He surveyed the ruin, the slain men, the direwolf corpses, Ramsay cooling on the floor. Victory felt brittle, edges jagged as broken glass. He sheathed Longclaw. A horn rang on the rampart. 3 long notes. Davos strode in, cloak trailing snow. "My lord." Riders approach from the east, banners of Manderley, Glover, Serwyn. They come pledging fealty now the Boltons are broken. His weathered face creased with a faint smile. "Seems the old house's answer at last." Jon exhaled slowly. He looked to Ghost, who licked a wound on his flank, but stood tall. Nymeria nosed her fallen kin, and growled soft sorrow. Jon knelt beside her massive head, pressing his brow to hers. "Your pack saved us," he whispered. In her ember eyes he saw weariness and unspoken understanding. Freedom's price always drew blood. He rose, shoulders rolling with fatigue, with a weight at once unbearable and utterly his. Snow filtered through the sundered roof as the storm abated, and in its fragile hush, Jon Snow felt the ancient stones breathe. Winterfell's heartbeat returned, no longer chained beneath flayed flesh. Yet as the fires were quenched and the wounded tended, whispers spread of ravens sighted winging from the Dreadfort, of umbers rallying uncertain bannermen, of a greater night stirring beyond the wall. Freed wolves howled at the dawning sky, but their song held warning. Victory was but a gate, and beyond lay paths dark and endless. Jon looked upon the direwolves roaming the courtyards, children shyly reaching to touch their fur, and he knew the North had been called back to its oldest tale, a tale written in frost and fang, in the marrow of the first men. And he, born bastard, born watcher, stood now not merely as Stark, nor as Snow, but as a bridge between man and beast, living and dead, summer dream and winter truth. Tomorrow he would gather the lords, set bones to rest, and lay plans for storms yet to come. Tonight, beneath pale torches, he walked the battlements where once he had paced as a boy dreaming of place and purpose. Ghost padded beside him, blood-dark pawprints melting into fresh snow. Jon rested a hand on the direwolf's neck and gazed into the northern night where the stars burned like cold promises. Winterfell breathed, and the direwolves kept watch. The ravens came with the dawn, black crosses upon a sky now iced in palest rose. They alighted on Winterfell's cracked merlons and on the bare branches of the godswood, shaking off rime as though discarding old sins. Jon Snow stood beneath them in the courtyard, the frigid breath of morning coiling from his mouth, while he watched Maester's lads scurry along the ramparts to gather those sealed cylinders heavy with northern tidings. Snowflakes lacquered the fresh thatch laid overnight to patch the gaping sections of roof. Hammer strokes rang thinly as a detail of black brothers mended the breach above the kennels. Around Jon, the direwolves moved like pale memory from a time before language. Coast half-limped, the bandage at his flank already clotted, while Nymeria wove a slow circle to study each newcomer bearing Stark or Karstark, or Manderley colors. Men bowed their heads when the wolves passed. Even grizzled spearmen from Deepwood, who swore they feared neither flayed man nor ironborn, set their pikes butt down and stepped aside. They whispered the beasts' names as charms, as if repeating them might convince winter's dark not to swallow all light. What they saw was a legend uncoiling. The living sigil of House Stark multiplied, stalking through ash and snow to reclaim what was owed. Jon had slept perhaps an hour, on a pallet near the broken hearth where once the Boltons burned scrolls and skins alike. Even in dreams he felt the keep sighing beneath him, as though the weirwood roots were unknotting pain trapped for too many seasons. Now, with sunrise paling the frost-hardened stones, he felt the weight of both triumph and debt pressing on his shoulders. The North had witnessed a miracle. Wolves leading men, men following a dead man returned. A bastard turned avenger. Miracles, he knew, exacted payment. He crossed to the covered trestles where wounded lay in neat ranks, furs drawn up to throats. A bare island healer bent over a boy whose thigh bore black lines of infection. Jon knelt, pressed his fingers lightly against the boy's wrist until he felt a thread of pulse. The lad's eyes fluttered open. Seeing Jon, he tried to rise. "Rest," Jon murmured, easing him back. "You fought bravely for Winterfell. For the pack," the boy whispered. Smile faint. Then his gaze flicked beyond Jon's shoulder. Ghost had settled close, red eyes watchful. The boy's smile widened despite pain, as though that wild presence alone could turn infection aside. Jon rose. "Boil the stitching needle between each wound," he told the healer quietly. "And mix foxglove tea for the fever." The woman's graying brows arched. "You've a maester's memory." "No," Jon replied, staring at the boy. "Only ghosts." By mid-morning the lords began to arrive. First came Lord Wyman Manderly, his crimson face wind-bitten, borne in a litter because his gout was raging yet again. He labored up the steps on a cane, blinking tears at the wolves, then clasped Jon's gloved hands. "Winterfell breathes," he rumbled, voice thick with awe. "I feel its heart beating again." Next thundered in galley beacons from White Harbor. A column of spearmen marshaled by Sir Marlon Manderly bearing silver trout banners twined with direwolves. Then Robert Glover led mounted archers through the postern, followed by Widow Lady Serwyn, whose cheeks were hollow from Bolton levies. The tall towers rang with each herald's cry of allegiance, and from window slits small folk peered wide-eyed, clutching children who mouthed the words "King" in the north, as though sampling honey. Jon greeted each delegation beneath the flayed man poles, now hacked down, and piled for burning beyond the moat. He listened to accounts of starving hamlets, raided caravans, umbers forced into oaths under threat of orphaned hostages. With each bitter chronicle, the storm inside him strengthened. When at last the influx slowed, Davos Seaworth found him by the dried-up well. "We'll need 2 barrels more oats for the White Harbor men and twice that in meat. I've quartermasters scouring cellars the Boltons never found." He glanced at the wolves nosing snowbanks for buried scents. "Some whisper the old gods themselves walk with us now." Jon wiped frost from Longclaw's pommel. "Gods or beasts, it matters less than what we do with the chance given." Davos studied him. Though some chances bite. The Umbers hold the Dreadfort and have sworn to the Lannisters still. They'll not bend the knee easily." Jon imagined the fortress's grim towers rising out of snow like iron fangs. "Direwolves have sharper teeth," he said. "Sharper, yes," Davos allowed, "but each fang needs a mind. The North is watching you, lad. They'll follow if you speak, yet the words must be yours." "No. I never wanted crowns, brother. I wanted only to do right. Doing right is why they want you to wear a crown." Davos' breath clouded. Ned Stark wore the weight so his small folk could walk unburdened. Would you deny them that shelter because the iron bruises your brow? Jon stared across the yard where a Manderly squire laughed as 6 direwolf cubs tussled in the straw. Ghost lay nearby, muzzle resting on paws, but his gaze never wavered from Jon. "I will not deny them," Jon said at last. "But I will not lie about what comes. The dead still march, and the wall cannot stand forever." "Then now win." "Then tell them," Davos said simply. They met in the great hall at dusk, candles banking the shadows like watchfires around a keep. The flayed man banners had been stripped, replaced by hastily sewn direwolves that bore needle lines still visible in the grease of tallow light. Yet even that crude sigil sent murmurs through the gathering. Jon stood at the center, flanked by Lady Mormont. Too small for the immense bearskin draped over her shoulders, yet fierce as a clan mother, and Tormund Giantsbane, whose laughter boomed each time a knight of the Greenlands eyed his great axe. Davos hovered at Jon's right, hand resting on the carved stag that reminded him of Shireen and past reckoning. Jon looked upon the faces, thin, haggard, animated by fresh hope. Old Lord Locke with frost on his grey beard. Widow Lady Dustin, whose grief made her lips curl like a wounded vixen. Clay Serwyn, scarcely older than the pages, pouring mulled wine. Behind them, on stone benches, free folk stood shoulder to shoulder with black brothers. Giants who had survived Hardhome, spearwives in patchwork mail, men of the Night's Watch still wearing crow-black, but clutching stark hilt-wraps. Across that improbable assembly prowled direwolves, silent as breath, as though the hall were a cavern in some forgotten pre-age warren. Jon drew Longclaw, the wolf head pommel catching torchlight. A hush fell. "This blade was mine at the wall," he began. "Forged in a time when the Night's Watch still guarded the realms of men. I swore an oath wearing black. I have died wearing black. I have bled upon this stone for a home once denied me." His gaze swept them. Yet walls crumble, oaths break. What endures is the blood beneath. Stark blood, northern blood. The song of the direwolf sung in the marrow of each of you. No matter what sigil you bear. He lowered the sword. Ramsay Bolton is dead, but the poison he poured into our lands remains. Stores burned, children enslaved, crops trampled under warhoof. Already snows deepen, and beyond the wall the dead gather, an army that does not feast, does not tire, and will devour every living thing unless we stand together. Neddy. A crackle went through the throng like sparks leaping between logs. Lord Wyman struggled upright, leaning on his cane. "I have heard tales, Lord Snow, of dead men walking at Hardhome, of blue eyes burning behind shattered shields. Yet we have heard such ghost stories before, the long night, the last hero. They are not stories." Jon's voice dropped to flint. "I have slain one of their commanders atop the wall. Ask those black brothers who ride with me." No. All eyes fell on Ed Tollett, who leaned on the haft of a cinderpike. The dour crow nodded once. Saw him drive his sword through that icy bastard's throat. Thing burst like glass struck by a hammer. Never seen the like. Murmurs rose. Lady Dustin's fingers whitened on her goblet. "So we must unite," Jon continued. "Not for crowns, not for vengeance, but for life." He looked to the wolves. "The old gods have sent us their hunters. Let this pack be our covenant. Each house a fang, each village a heartbeat. Alone a beast may falter. Together it brings down giants. Now." He sheathed Longclaw, then unfastened the direwolf pelt clasped across his shoulders. Sun-bleached and scarred from battles at the Fist and Castle Black. He laid it on the floor between pillars. "If unity demands more of me than swords, here I stand unarmored." For a moment, only the snap of pitch-soaked torches answered. Then Lord Glover stepped forward. He knelt, palm crossing his breast. "House Glover gives its sword and spear to the wolf. Next Lady Serwyn, eyes bright with unshed tears. House Serwyn gives Winterfell its hearth." Sir Marlon advanced bearing Manderly's silvered trident banner. Behind him 2 knights sank to one knee. "For the north, for the sea, for the wolf in the white," he intoned. Voices joined until the hall trembled. Dustin, Locke, Reswell's bastard cousins, Lesser Hill clans, spearwives from the Skirling Pass, swearing in guttural tongue. And over the swell rose the high clear call of Lady Lyanna Mormont. "The North remembers. We named him Stark when he needed us, and he named us Pack when we bled. I do not care if he is bastard or ghost. I know he is the North made flesh, and I will follow." "Damned." Her words rang like a smith's hammer. A final hush, then applause like thunder. Swords lifted aloft, axe heads slammed against shields. Snow dust sifted from rafters with the vibration. Jon felt the roar wash through him, part exaltation, part fear so keen it glittered. Across the hall, Ghost threw back his head and howled, the note vibrating bones. Nymeria answered, deeper, more ancient. The other wolves took up the cry. Men and women who had never heard the old tongue felt tears spill, remembering grandmother's lullabies about the first winter kings. And so beneath that wild chorus, they named Jon Snowkin in the north. One man did not kneel. A gaunt figure, cloaked in a patched surcoat, slouched near the door, gloved hand resting on an axe. His eyes, pale and hard, remained on Jon amid the tumult. When cheers faded, Jon addressed him. "Lord Umber." Crowd parted, revealing Great Jon's younger brother, known in rumor as Huther Umber, yet called Small Jon no longer. The weight he bore cut a decade's age into his face. "The Dreadfort yet stands," Umber said in a voice hoarse from cold marches. "You would have us march again, so soon after blood on these stones?" "We must," Jon answered. "The Boltons left garrisons across the north. Hostages in Umber hands. Hostages like children of my blood." Bitterness twitched Umber's mouth. "They will flay my kin should I raise banners." Nymeria moved before Jon, hackles bristling. Umber's hand tightened on the axe. But Jon stepped around the direwolf and came down the dais. "We do not abandon kin," he said calmly. "We rescue them. Join us, and I swear on my father's grave every hostage shall be returned unharmed. And if they're already skinned, then vengeance." Jon's voice was quiet iron. "But we will try steel before sorrow." Silence. Then Umber gave a stiff nod. "The last hearth stands with Winterfell." A breath released among the watching lords. Jon clasped Umber's forearm. He felt how thin the man's skin was over starved muscle. The North had been starved too long. 2 days later, Jon crossed Winterfell's yard in blowing sleet toward the wooden loft converted into council chamber. Each gust rattled arrow slits and drove sparks from forge fires where smiths reshod horses. The wolves coursed ahead, scattering chickens. Inside the loft, Tormund lounged near the brazier, tearing strips from a joint of smoked boar. Davos pored over rendered maps weighted by daggers. Lady Mormont sat atop a mead barrel that served as her chair, quill scratching on parchments with bare fur-gloved hand. Jon shook off clinging ice and leaned beside Davos. "What tidings?" "Manderley's riders reached the rills," Davos said. "Lady Barbary warns of a Lannister envoy traveling north to treat with the Karstarks." "An envoy cannot march through snows alone," Jon mused. "A company of Sellswords rides escort." Davos pointed to rough markings on the map. "Begni Mole." "And talk of gold. Much gold. Enough to buy hearts grown hungry." Jon traced the path. "We intercept. If the Lannisters seek to bribe the North, they'll find wolves instead." "Intercept quiet or loud?" Tormund asked, mouth full. "Quiet." Jon thought of father's lessons. A gloved knife is sharper than a sword brandished. "We cannot waste lives on open skirmish while snow falls thicker each morning." Lady Mormont sealed her parchment with a smear of wax and pressed her signet. "I have scribes copying decrees. Each house must contribute grain and cured meat to Winterfell. Direwolves can hunt, but men need bread." Tormund chuckled. "Spoken like a true little bear queen." Lyanna glared until even the giant of the free folk cleared his throat and glanced away. Jon's hand strayed to the fresh crown, simple bronze circlet wrought that morning in the forge. He felt its chill, though it hung on the wall. A symbol heavier than iron. "We ride at first light," he declared. "But first, I must visit the crypts." Torch in hand, Jon descended the spiral where roots coiled like frozen worms through the stone. The crypt air carried dust and the faint salt tang of old tears. He passed statues of kings of winter and queens of ice, past Lyanna's figure wreathed now with fresh winter roses. At last he halted before the new-cut alcove where Eddard Stark's bones had finally returned after so many seasons absent. The statue was unfinished, just a rough block shaped into the promise of a kneeling man. Ghost padded forward, nose brushing the cold marble. Jon knelt, lowering the torch. Shadows danced. "I have your home, father," he whispered. "But I do not know if I still have myself." Silence. Yet from somewhere within the chill earth came the faint echo of water dripping. "I've taken life tonight and last night and nights before," he continued. "I have worn black oaths and king's cloaks. The dead call to me, but the living need me louder. Show me the path." From the darkness emerged another presence. Jon sensed before he saw. Long stride, the scrape of rough boots. He rose and turned. Sansa stood at the entrance, auburn hair dulled by torch glow, eyes rimmed in red. "You should be abed," Jon said softly. She had ridden through the night from the White Knife, where she'd been sheltering fisherfolk. "And miss our father's coronation?" She attempted a smile. "I had to see for myself." Her gaze drifted to the wolves. Ghost bowed his head. Sansa slowly extended a hand and stroked behind his ear. "I used to dream of this," she whispered. "Home reclaimed, you leading." "But dreams rarely show the cost," Jon answered. Her shoulders shivered. "I know the cost. Yet some part of me feels safe. The wolves, the people chanting your name." She met his eyes. "But I also feel something stirring here." She pressed a hand to her breast. "A cold wind from the night sky. Can you feel it?" Jon thought of Hardhome, of ice spiders glimpsed through blizzard swirl. "Yes." "Then promise me you will not ride alone when that wind arrives." "I promise." She leaned, rested her brow against his. They shared the stillness of blood that once belonged to the same firelit hall, now bound by sorrows none could voice. At last, Sansa stepped back. "Come," she said. "Your lords await." Jon glanced again at his father's unfinished statue, then extinguished the torch. In darkness, he ascended with Sansa and Ghost. Over the next fortnight, Winterfell rang with preparations. Axes felled pines in the wolfswood, looms clacked weaving new banners, smiths hammered wolf-headed spears. Cub direwolves were assigned to kennel workers who struggled to keep up with appetites rivaling war horses. On the training fields, Tormund drilled Karstark deserters until they could loose arrows in volleys alongside wildling eagle-eyed women. Sansa organized the keep's women into sewing circles, churning out quilted doublets lined with rabbit fur. She rode to Barrowton and back to negotiate wheat convoys through drifting snow. When she returned, a newborn direwolf pup rode in her cloak, gray with one russet ear. The women of Barrowton called it luck. On the 14th night, Jon inspected the perimeter ramparts when horns sounded from the east. A column of riders slipped along the King Road bannerless, their shapes blurred by heavy flurries. Scouts confirmed Lannister coiners. Jon summoned his strike force, 24 on foot led by Tormund, and above them on the parapet, archers chosen for night sight. Nymeria and Ghost padded ahead to guide them along frost-slick ravines beneath the moonless sky. They set ambush near a broken mill, where the road narrowed between dune-like snowbanks. The wind moaned over frozen fields. Jon waited among skeletal reeds, breath shallow. Beside him, Sansa crouched, cloaked in white. She had insisted on attending. "To meet our enemies with open eyes," she'd argued. Jon relented after she produced the heart dagger once belonging to Arya Tot. Hoofbeats drummed faint through powdery night. Unsuspecting torchbearers approached, gold-trimmed surcoats muffled against cold. Their captain raised a horn to shout command. An arrow sprouted from his throat. Chaos ignited. Wolves erupted from banks, white and gray flashes ripping reins. Horses screaming. Tormund's men surged, axes splintering shields. Sellsword scattered but found only swirling snow walls, channeling them into fangs and blades. Within breaths, the caravan was undone, the chest wagons overrun. Jon dismounted the captain's horse, scanning for stragglers. A crossbow twanged from beneath a turned sleigh. He spun to shield Sansa, but Ghost already vaulted, intercepting the bolt mid-flight. Wood shattered on his breastplate harness. Ghost landed on the crossbowman, jaws closing with finality. When silence settled, Jon strode to the largest wagon, smashed the lock. Inside gleamed stacks of minted silver, lion-stamped. He hefted a coin, cold and gleaming. "A fortune in deception," Sansa murmured, joining him. Jon dropped the coin into snow. "Melted into arrowheads. Better use." They burned the convoy's corpses atop a pyre lit with Lannister banners. Jon watched the gold thread char and curl, releasing black sparks into the sky. Snowflakes hissed on embers, turning red heat to cold steam. Word of the failed bribe raced wider than wildfire. Karstark outriders fled back to the last river, confessing doubts of southern gold. House Ryswell marched horsemen to Winterfell's cause. Hill clans poured out of cave villages bearing antler-tip lances. Yet each victory invited retaliation. On the 21st evening, a raven arrived bearing a flayed direwolf skin nailed to its tiny casque. The note beneath read, "Your pack dies. Give up Umber heirs or watch them peeled." Signed in Flensing, Lord Ramsay's last heir, Lord Stepford Bolton. Ramsay's cousin, a pale slip of a youth once hostage in King's Landing, had fled to the Dreadfort and now styled himself Avenger. Rumor claimed he studied skincraft under Qyburn. Jon gathered counsel in the Solar. Sansa's face was iron. Tormund cursed until Davos told him to save breath for strategy. "We cannot yield hostages," Jon said. "And we cannot allow Bolton terror to endure." "Storm the Dreadfort," Tormund rumbled. "High walls, frozen moat, supply lines thin." Davos countered, "A siege through winter starves our own as swift." Jon turned to Sansa. "You know their cruelty. What would break them?" "Fear," she answered. "A fear deeper than theirs. They believe everyone can be bought or skinned. Show them something that will not kneel and cannot be flayed." Jon's gaze drifted to the wolves outside, yipping at drifting snowflakes. 3 nights later, under cloud-veiled moon, the wolves of Winterfell slipped from the gate in silent column. Nymeria leading, Ghost beside Jon on horseback, and a dozen full-grown direwolves with riders clad in grey leather harnesses, cunningly rigged by Sansa's seamstresses. Small archers from Bear Island and wildling spearwives, and 2 acolytes of the Night's Watch chosen for calm spirits. They rode astride the great backs as though born to it, low-slung saddles that rested between shoulder blades. Reins unnecessary, but offered for balance. Each wolf wore iron caps spiked like snarling eyebrows. At their rear marched 200 foot in mottled cloaks, faces smeared with ash to blend into dusk. They skirted the main trail, following deer tracks over frozen streams until the Dreadfort's cruel furnaces came into view. Lord Stepford Bolton arrogantly patrolled ramparts, his household guard waving flayed man lanterns. Beneath the western tower, a platform was erected where 3 small silhouettes hung chained. Umber girls no older than 10. Jon's jaw tightened. They waited until midnight, when a horn signaled guard shift. Then Nymeria barreled out of tree cover, her riders loosing flaming arrows at tar buckets perched along the wall. The buckets shattered, spilling fire that licked upward, silhouetting wolf shapes. 3 man-heights tall. The Bolton sentries screamed. Ghost and 2 greys bounded along the outer moat, drawing arrow fire. Meanwhile, Jon's ash-cloaked spearmen slithered across the frozen ditch where Davos sappers earlier had weakened a section. With pry bars they cracked it. Silent as otters they slid under the palisade, scaled inner courtyards and opened a postern. Within 6 minutes wolves prowled the Dreadfort's yard. Bolton guards broke ranks at the sight of riders astride monstrous hounds. One bolt struck Nymeria's helm. She shook it off and pounced, crushing the shooter. Jon rode Ghost through the open gate, long claw gleaming, dot caught. He found Stepford Bolton at the scaffold, knife poised at an Umber child's ear. The boy lord's hand trembled when Ghost leapt the steps. "Monster!" Bolton shrieked. "You'll not take her alive, mongrel." He tried to cut the hostage's throat, but a Bear Island archer fired. Shaft pierced Bolton's wrist. Blade clattered away. Jon closed the distance and slammed him to the planks. Bolton wept as wolves ringed him. "Mercy," he sobbed. "I was forced." "You forced yourself," Jon said quietly. He bound the weeping youth and ordered him locked in the kennels. By dawn the Dreadfort was theirs. Hostages freed. Flame chambers thrown open to winter air where evidence of horrors froze in dripping stalactites. Jon stood before the assembled captives and soldiers. "The flayed man is gone," he declared, tearing the last banner from the tower and casting it into a pyre. "You are Northmen again, or you are nothing." Most bent knees swiftly. Those who tried to flee found direwolf teeth waiting. Stepford Bolton faced justice at midday. Jon summoned the freed families to witness. Rather than flay, he chose northern law. Bolton was stripped, wolfskin draped over his shoulders. He would run into the forest unarmed with 1 hour's head start. Should he reach the weeping water, he would earn exile. Should the wolves find him first, the old gods would pass sentence. Bolton bolted sobbing into pine thickets. Nymeria loped after with half the pack. No one ever saw him reach the river. Snow fell thicker by the day. Tracks vanished hours after being made. Columns of refugees trudged toward Winterfell from every corner, drawn by rumors that the direwolves guarded hearths and grain. Sansa organized them into work details: digging root cellars, fletching arrows, boiling lard for lanterns. The keep became a hive of voices speaking Karstark lilts, Manderley sing-song, Bear Island growls, free folk gutturals. On the first full moon of midwinter, Jon stood atop the old broken tower now repaired, surveying the valley. Dozens of watchfires dotted the camps beyond the walls. Beyond them lay miles of white solitude leading south to Moat Cailin and north to ice-clad emptiness. He felt winter's pulse in his own veins, slowing, deepening, steady as the breath of a sleeping giant. Beside him, Sansa joined, cloak whipping in wind. "Father would hardly know this place," she said. "Perhaps he would," Jon answered. "A home reclaimed, people of every blood finding refuge behind its stones." She rubbed her gloved hands. "I hear word the Night's Watch loses men nightly to whites. I must ride north." Sansa closed her eyes, snow catching in her lashes. "I will not ask you to stay. I only ask you promise to return." He thought of promises broken by swords and storms. Yet he said, "I will return." She opened her eyes, blue as mountain lakes. In them Jon saw the same iron resolve that had carried her through cruelty he could scarce imagine. "Then go," she whispered. She kissed his cheek, the warmth fleeting in the wind. He descended the tower where Ghost awaited, already saddled. Nymeria sat with her riders, 20 wolves strong now, a moving wall of fur. Tormund cracked jokes about dead men's brittle bones. Davos oversaw supply sleds. Lady Mormont marched at the head of 40 Bear Islanders, armed with axes shining like moonlight. Jon mounted and addressed the massed ranks. Wildlings, Night's Watch, Northmen, clansfolk, children of the forest rumored to watch from tree shadows. "We go to meet the night," he called, voice steady. "But we go as pack. And a pack hunts. It does not hide." A cheer rose, swallowed swiftly by the icy wind. Then Ghost bounded forward, Jon leaning low. Wolves loped at his flank, riders urging them north, banners streaming behind like phantom stars. Snow swallowed hoofbeats, but their howls rolled ahead through the barren dark. A song older than castles, deeper than fear. They crossed the shivering forest in 3 days, taking deer paths that only wolves scented beneath drifted moss. Each dawn they found tracks. Human feet dragged across snow, ice-rimmed prints of skeletal horses. At dusk they sighted fires burning blue. That night, Jon forbade campfires and ordered silence so complete only heartbeats kept men from believing themselves already entombed. On the 4th day, near the Weeping Pass, they encountered the first white column. Frozen soldiers in cracked mail trudged under tattered banners of forgotten houses. Blue eyes gleamed, mouths silent. Jon deployed archers behind snow hummocks. At his whistle flaming arrows rained, and wolves plunged in. Steel did little. Fire did more. Ghost tore through ribs brittle as tinder. Nymeria seized a gaunt rider and dashed it upon rocks until spines shattered. Yet, they kept coming. Jon fought side by side with Tormund and Lyanna, his Valyrian blade slicing heads free while the girl lord darted between legs with bear-claw daggers. When the last fell, silence rang louder than clamor. They had lost 9 men, 2 wolves scored by frostbite wounds that smoked where undead claws raked. "We cannot hold this road," Davos said, panting clouds. "More follow." "Then we change the game," Jon answered. He ordered scouts to locate a gorge where cliffs rose sheer. Tormund found such a ravine 2 miles on. Jon set every brush of pine and cedar they could gather, soaked in pitch along the walls. When the next dead cohort emerged, hundreds this time, they lured them at a run between the narrows. Archers unleashed firepots. The gorge became a furnace roaring hot enough to crack stone. Flames reflected in those cold blue eyes until they burst, shards spinning like diamond. But with each victory, Jon sensed a deeper cold creeping southward. The air itself tasted dead. Even living throats rasped as though dusted by shards of hoarfrost. Nights no longer held silence, but a faint, distant crackle. Ice fracturing across the world's spine. At the foot of the wall, Castle Black half stood, one tower collapsed. Samwell Tarly greeted Jon in tears. The old bear would be proud. He sobbed, embracing him. Gilly cradled a bundled babe, whose cheeks were plum dark with cold. Inside the hall where once they burned, fallen brothers, Jon convened council with the senior rangers who remained. They numbered less than 100. "The wall cannot last," Ed Tollett said bluntly. "Too many tunnels, too few men." "Then we hold what we can and evacuate south," Jon decided. "But first we ride to Eastwatch. I will face whatever commands these dead." "Face?" Sam asked, voice small. Jon looked past him to the direwolves pacing restless outside the charred doors. "Yes. If the legends are true, the Night King leads them. Cut off the head, the body falls. Or you fall," Davos muttered. But Jon's gaze was steady. At dawn they rode east along the base of the wall. Snow glare blinding. At intervals they heard distant horns, not of men but something other. Long mournful calls that made marrow ring. The Direwolves pricked ears and whined. 2 days' march brought them to Eastwatch's shattered gate, where ice chunks the size of hall roofs lay strewn. Beyond, the sea churned gray beneath storm clouds. Here the dead massed by thousands, waiting for pack ice to thicken. Jon climbed a shelf of fallen ice to survey. Amidst the ranks rode tall figures on skeletal horses, crowns of icicles spidering across brows. One lifted a lance carved from crystal. At its tip hung a human head rimed in white. Lord Commander Slint by the remains of the cloak. Ghost growled, hackles high. Jon's blood cooled to iron. He descended. "We cannot charge that," Davos said. "No," Jon agreed. "But we can strike where they least expect." He unfurled a crude map Sam had pieced from old town scrolls. It showed caverns rumored to tunnel under the wall near the gorge, carved by children of the forest long before man built with ice. If those passages still existed, they might carry a small force behind enemy lines to strike at the Night King's lieutenants. "I'll lead," Jon declared. Tormund spat. "Ice worms'll swallow you. Better me than the realm." He met each eye, Davos Sam, Lyanna Sansa, who had insisted on accompanying the march this far. "Choose who follows. The rest prepare the wall with every wildfire jar left in Dragonstone stores." Night fell. They found the tunnel entrance amid collapse half buried in scree. Inside, bitter air smelled of ancient pine. Dripping gave sound to blackness. Jon, Ghost, Nymeria, Tormund, and 10 rangers advanced, single file. The wolves navigated by senses beyond sight, guiding them round chasms where cold winds howled upward from unknown deeps. After hours they emerged onto the northern slope beyond the wall, cloaked by a stand of snow-caked altars. The dead camped below, tens of thousands, silent except for that brittle hiss. Amidst them towered the Night King, blue eyes luminous beneath a shattered moon. Jon drew Longclaw. "We aim for his captains," he whispered. "If stories hold true, kill one, and the whites he turned fall." Tormund grinned like a wolf himself. "Let's carve frost tonight." They descended in silence. Nymeria moved with impossible grace, bearing a manderly archer who carried dragonglass-tipped arrows. Ghost padded at Jon's heel. They crept through ranks of unmoving dead. Frost blew off them like spores. Jon felt heat drain from his skin. They reached a ridge of broken ice spires. Beyond, the Night King sat his steed. 2 generals flanked him, their armor crystalline and pale. Jon signaled. The archer loosed, one arrow buried in the nearer general's chest, exploding in a pulse of blue fire. Instantly, 3,000 whites collapsed into brittle heaps. The Night King turned his gaze directly on Jon. Cold pierced like spears. He raised an arm. Frostwind howled. On all sides, dead stirred. "Run!" Jon shouted. They sprinted. Ghost and Nymeria bounded ahead, slashing. But the ground itself seemed alive. Skeletal hands burst through snow, gripping ankles. Rangers fell, screaming. Jon hacked through a clawing corpse and dragged Tormund free. Half his men were swallowed. They scrambled for the tunnel entrance, flagging bright with a torch. Behind, the Night King advanced in long strides, cracking the earth, raising fresh horrors. Jon thrust Tormund through first, then Nymeria with her rider. He turned to pull Ghost, but the albino snarled and pushed him inside instead. "Ghost, come!" Jon shouted. But Ghost wheeled at the tunnel mouth, facing the oncoming tide, red eyes blazing. He howled, and it echoed like thunder. Jon's heart tore. He lunged, but Tormund gripped him. "He buys our time." Ghost charged. Blue eyes drowned in crimson light as the wolf barreled into dead ranks. Jon watched until the passage collapsed in a roar of ice, sealing the tunnel. They staggered back through darkness thinned to lantern flicker. Jon walked as if in dream, blood roaring in his ears. At last daylight broke through the exit, and they spilled onto the southern side of the wall. Sam met them. Horror in his gaze. Face pale as snow, Jon whispered one word. "Ghost." Sam's voice cracked. "We saw. Whites falling apart by the hundreds. Whatever you did." Jon barely heard. He sank to knees, the world a blur. Yet amid the grief he felt a strange hush, as if Ghost's heartbeat still echoed in his own ribs. Nearby, a direwolf cub, Luck, lifted her nose to the sky and howled. From distant Winterfell, other wolves answered. And Jon realized the bond was not severed, but spread. Pack not ended, but stronger for each sacrifice. He rose, wiping tears that froze to lashes. "We fight on," he said. Above, clouds shredded to reveal the first shimmering veil of aurora, rippling green across the stars like banners of unseen armies. Jon Snow, king in the north, squared his shoulders beneath the crimson glare. Winter was not yet done, neither was he. The pack hunted still, thought for 17 seconds. Dawn limped across the wall in weak ambers, but no warmth accompanied the color. Jon Snow stood on the frost-slick veranda of the king's tower, and watched vapor rise from the boiling kettles below, where black brothers melted snow into water for horses already gaunt along the ribs. Every clang of iron shoes on flagstones reminded him that Ghost's padding footfalls would sound no more. The absence throbbed like a missing limb, an ache he could neither wrap in linen nor ignore. Nymeria paced at the foot of the steps, restive without her white-furred brother, and the rest of the pack mirrored her disquiet, ears twitching, tails low, eyes constantly sweeping the horizon as though they expected their lost alpha to surge from the drifts. Jon turned as Samwell Tarly approached, hood ruffed up, parchment clutched to his chest. Snowflakes dotted Sam's lashes. "I found it," he said, voice hushed though no curious ears lingered nearby. In Maester Aemon's strongbox, beneath the old tax ledgers. A map older than the conquest, ink almost flaked to dust. But the legend is clear. Jon followed Sam back inside to the sputtering torchlight of the solar, where Davos and Tormund bent over a rough-hewn table pocked with candle burns. Sansa sat cross-legged on a bench, armored in sober wool and fur, her auburn hair braided tight against a gale that prowled the corridor. Sam unrolled his fragile treasure. Its corners curled as though eager to return to secrecy, but in the center, a faded insignia bloomed, twin eagles locked over an island shape so jagged it resembled a wolf's head. "Skagos," Davos murmured, fingertips brushing the parchment with reverence. "I hauled onions past that haunt once. A place of cannibals and goat-horned myths. And of dragon glass," Sam added. "Vines of it, running through the cliffs like night in stone. If we had Skagos blades instead of flint shards, every man who faces the walkers might yet live to see spring." Tormund's beard bristled. "Your boats are burst timbers buried under ice. Onion Knight. How do we cross seas that freeze each dusk?" "We sail up the shivering strait while daylight holds," Davos answered. "A sloop can cheat the pack ice if its keel is narrow, and its captain mad enough to dance between flows. Joan's gaze dropped to the map. The distances shrank beneath the weight of need. Rivers wider than castles and seas that had drowned fleets felt no larger than sword cuts. "If Skagos arms the north," he said, tracing the coastline, "we still lack the fire to melt dragonglass quick enough. Coal is scarce. We have but 2 smelters left intact." Sansa spoke, her voice low and certain. "There is fire older than coal. The God's Wood at Winterfell stands above caverns choked with warm springs. Bran felt them when he was a boy, you remember. Steam enough to forge blades day and night without char rations." "Menmishan." Jon looked up. "Bran?" "He rides south from Last Hearth," she replied. "A raven came at dawn. Mira Reed escorts him." Tormund grinned. "A cripple and a Reed girl? The snows will eat them." "Not if the wolves run north to meet them," Sansa countered. Jon felt the surge ripple through the pack before Nymeria lifted her head, amber eyes fixing on him. The choice was plain: divide or perish. He nodded once. Go. Bring them home." The she-wolf swung away, and 7 grown Direwolves loped after her, luck scurrying in their wake like a pale shadow of ghosts, lost youth. That night Jon convened his captains beneath a banner-draped archway, where the wind shrieked like steel on ice. The plan unfurled as cold logic. Davos would command the sloop Maiden's Sigh, scrounged from Eastwatch's half-frozen docks and patched with pine. Tormund would lead 300 free folk on sledges along the coast to harry any white columns that might mass for pursuit. Jon himself would sail with Davos and Sam, 70 volunteers no older than 25, the youngest burned hot, and their bones bent slow in frost. Sansa would ride for Winterfell to ready the hot spring forges. She laid a gloved hand on Jon's chest before they parted. "Do not chase his shadow," she whispered. "He knew whose. Ghost is part of you, but he is not all of you." Jon managed a thin smile. "Tell that to the emptiness beside my cot." Her eyes shimmered. "I will fill it with hope." They clutched each other in the courtyard, where the others pretended not to look, and when Sansa finally swung onto her horse, the world felt narrower for the space she left. The Maiden's Sigh shoved off before dawn, oars creaking like old ribs. Sea spray froze on beard and brow the instant it touched air. Gulls wheeled overhead, white shapes against an iron sky, until the birds turned south and vanished beyond the wall's looming spine. Northward, only silence reigned. The shivering sea lay quilted in plate-glass sheets, each floe jutting like a jagged tooth. Davos threaded among them with a gambler's grin, every shouted order crisp, precise. Twice they rammed a floe that cracked and rolled away like a toppled rampart. Once the keel scraped hidden ice so hard the hull groaned like a wounded bull walrus. Still they forged ahead, towing 2 bark-hulled skiffs laden with iron cauldrons, tongs, and every dragonglass chisel left at Castle Black. Sam labored at the bow, chafing palms that had known only ink until Hardhome scarred his memory. In stolen moments, he read a crumbling treatise on glass candles, muttering to himself about obsidian's memory for fire. Jon listened while steering rope, grateful for the scholar's steady babble. Talking eased the groan of ghosts. Each time he gazed at the gray horizon, he half expected to see a white wolf trotting across the floes, red eyes gleaming with feral mirth. They sighted Skagos on the 4th dusk, its cliffs rearing from haze like broken daggers. Storm clouds churned above the jagged peaks. Lightning flickered sheet white behind crags, but the thunder never reached them, swallowed by wind carrying the scent of pine sap and rotted kelp. Davos guided the sloop into a narrow fjord, hidden between twin spires of basalt. The water deepened to black glass. Mountains leaned inward as though conspiring. No smoke rose to betray villages. Only the caws of cormorants disturbed the hush. They made camp on a shale beach where waves sighed like tired lungs beneath a crust of ice. Flickering torches threw monstrous shadows on the cliff face as Jon led scouts inland. Towering spruce loomed over moss that glimmered blue in starlight. Animal skulls hung from branches, bleached and cracked. More than once they found stone circles around ash pits still warm, though no footprints lingered. Cannibals. Skagosi legends muttered of goat-skinned folk who ate strangers to steal their courage. Jon wondered what meal they prepared for walkers should whites discover these shores. At dawn they reached a ridge overlooking a quarry carved into the mountainside like a festering wound. Obsidian vines spiderwebbed across exposed rock, glossy as spilled ink under the rising sun. Sam exhaled a reverent oath. Enough to arm 10 kingdoms. Davos set pit crews to work while sentries posted archers between pillars of basalt. The first strike of iron on glass rang clear and high like a temple bell. All-day shards piled into baskets, glittering purple-black. By night, the air danced with clouds of powdered obsidian, stinging eyes, scoring lungs. Jon swung a pick beside his men, throat raw, palms blistered, because kings who did not bleed with soldiers soon found their crowns made of bones. When at last stars crept overhead, they had filled 6 dozen crates. The second night the cannibals came. A horn blared from the south end of camp, thin and quivering. Jon jerked awake, hand on longclaw. Pale shapes flickered between trees, men garbed in goat hides, antlered masks, their weapons of splintered whalebone and rusted cleavers. They hissed words in a tongue older than High Valyrian. Arrows whistled, one thunking into a crate beside Sam's shoulder. Jon bellowed for shield wall. The Skagosi charged, shrieking. But the Night's Watch survivors already formed a ragged half-circle. Obsidian dust still coated everything. It drifted in clouds around the foes. As the goatmen swung bone axes, powdered dragonglass blew into their eyes like sand. They shrieked, clawing faces. Jon crashed into them, pommel first, cracking a mask. Davos gutted another with a dirk. Sam, surprising himself, clubbed a third down with a pick-haft. Nymeria was not there. Jon felt her absence keenly, yet echoes of ghost surged in his blood. He fought with grim precision, as though the white wolf guided each stroke. The cannibals broke, melting into forest. Dawn revealed 30 masks abandoned among the trunks. Jon found a carving on one, a weirwood face with obsidian tears. Sam translated from a gloss he'd glimpsed once in Old Town. They call themselves the Stone Children. They believe every piece of obsidian is a drop of snow shed by the moon when it wept for lovers lost to fire. So we mine their gods' tears, Davos said. No wonder they're cross. Jon searched the tree line. He doubted the Stone Children would relent, while mortals desecrated sacred stone. Yet obsidian meant survival. He ordered double watches and continued the work, but that night he climbed alone to a high spur, overlooking the fjord. He carried no torch, starlight enough silvered the world. There he sank to knees, palms pressed against rough basalt, and closed his eyes. Ghost, he called into the dark behind his eyelids. The cold wind replied, swirling across the ridge with a note that sounded eerily like the direwolf's mournful howl. Jon's heart hammered. He breathed again. Nothing. Still. All the way back to camp he felt a presence trailing him, too large for a man, too silent for a beast. On the 5th day, the Stone Children returned in force. Drums of hollow bone echoed through ravines, and fires blossomed along ridges. Hundreds advanced, masks painted crimson, flensing knives raised. Jon's sentries loosed arrow after arrow, but the Stone Children pressed closer, driven by fervor stronger than fear. Dragonglass dust carried on wind, blinded some, yet others wrapped their masks in damp kelp. The ring closed. Back to the boats, Davos cried, one arm bloodied from a hooked spear. Miners toppled crates into skiffs, scrambling across slippery rocks. Jon helped Sam haul a chest nearly too heavy for both. An antlered warrior lunged. Jon pivoted, slash-parried, kicked knee. The warrior fell underfoot, but another replaced him. Blades flashed, clanged on Longclaw's Valyrian steel, sparks flying off black glass. Sweat stung Jon's eyes. His lungs burned. The sky turned a deep bruised purple as storm clouds rolled in. Then a howl split the fray so wild it seemed the island itself cried rage. From the forest poured Nymeria's pack. She must have looped the coastline, tracking Jon's scent over leagues of ice. She bounded onto the shale. Her rider crouched low. Luck sprinted after her, no longer cub awkward but lean and quick, coat whiter than salt. Wolf and woman met stone child. Masks shattered, limbs flew, and within heartbeats the goatmen were breaking, terror palpable. Wolves chased them into the forest, but Nymeria returned swiftly, loping to Jon's side, muzzle streaked copper. She butted his shoulder. He pressed his brow to hers, and the knot inside him loosened. "How did you find us so soon?" he asked the rider, a bare island girl named Rona, half hidden in Nymeria's gray ruff. She pointed to Luck, now sniffing Jon's gauntlet. "Followed this little warrior." She never stopped howling north. Jon knelt, ruffling Luck's ears. A tremor ran through his arm, memory of Ghost's pale fur. Yet he felt no grief then, only wonder at the spark still alive between man and beast. Storm winds battered the coast that night, thunder shaking cliffs. Jon gathered his people beneath canvas strung from prow to stern, speaking over the hammer of rain. "We came for stone," he said, "and stone we have. Tomorrow we sail. But mark the lesson the stone children taught. Faith can swing a blade sharper than steel. We will honor their gods' tears." He gestured to Sam, who produced a smaller chest, filled not with raw shards, but carved amulets, obsidian pendants etched with the direwolf and the moon. "Every soldier that fights beneath our banners will carry one. Let this be pact. The moon weeps for the living, the wolf howls for the fallen." They scattered the remaining stone children masks upon the waves, committing enmity to the abyss. Morning dawned bronze and copper, as the sun climbed behind boiling clouds. They cast off, hull low in the water with their quarry. Two stone children survivors watched from a spur, expression unreadable behind crimson paint. T. Jon met their gaze across tumbling surf and raised Longclaw in salute. Slowly, the painted figures lowered spears in return. The voyage south was a gauntlet of ice storms and white shadows glimpsed on distant floes. Twice Sam rang the warning bell when shapes climbed half-submerged toward the hull, dead sailors bloated under armor, lips black with rot. Archers picked them off. Every arrow tip shimmered, obsidian. Each corpse sank without stirring again. Still, unease stalked the decks. Jon felt the night kings were traveling through frost, sensing the dragonglass slipping out of reach. 9 days after departure, they rounded the wall's eastern shadow and beached beneath Eastwatch's ruined gate. Tormund scouts met them, spirits ragged. The wildling slapped Jon's back. "The dead march slower since you skewered their ice lord, but march they do. 3 days, maybe 4, and they reach the gorge. Then?" Jon dispatched ravens before the sails even furled. Sansa's reply returned on wings ragged with exhaustion. "Hot spring forge ready. Bran arrived alive. Vale knights riding north." A single sentence chilled Jon more than sleet. "Dragons sighted above White Knife." Dragons. The word beat like a second heart behind his sternum as they trudged south, sledges groaning beneath obsidian crates. Vale riders met them near Queen's Crown, sleek destriers bearing knights mailed like mirrors. At their head rode Sir Robert Royce, bronze plates gleaming with runes of the first men. He dismounted before Jon, sank to one knee. "For the pack," he said simply, and Jon clasped his arm. Winterfell's towers rose through swirling flurries on the 7th dusk, their torchlit windows blinking welcome. The courtyard thrummed, smiths feeding coal to steam vents, bellows whooshing as iron tongs plunged dragonglass into molten hearts. Bran waited near the Godswood gate, seated on a carved weirwood throne pushed by Mira. His eyes seemed too old for the boy Jon remembered. When wolves bounded to him, they lowered heads as though greeting a silent alpha. "I saw you on Skagos," Bran said. "Through a hawk's eyes. You weep in your sleep." Jon knelt by the chair. "We all weep." Bran laid his thin hand on Jon's wrist. "Ghost is not lost. The spirit of a direwolf is a river. Sometimes it sinks beneath ice, but it moves still." His pupils dilated until only black remained. "Close your eyes." Jon obeyed. For an instant, heat flared behind his breastbone, white and ferocious, like a heart beating outside his chest. He gasped. The heat faded, replaced by something akin to weightless snow falling upward. He opened his eyes. Bran's were normal again, but there lingered an echo of a howl in Joan's ears, distant yet clear. Hope. He swallowed hard. Can that spirit fight? It already does, Bran whispered. They gathered in the hall that night. Nobles, free folk, black brothers, Vale riders, stone children envoys escorted by Nymeria, strangers who walked barefoot on stone, even in snow, and bowed heads only to the weirwood. Jon addressed them beneath banners of direwolf and moon, intertwined. The Night King reels from our strike, but the wound is shallow, he said. He will come with every corpse the cold can claim, driven by hatred older than crowns. Tomorrow we march to Wolf's Mouth Valley. There the hot springs vent warmth enough to keep snow from drifting high. We fight where fire meets ice. Sam unrolled parchments, patterns for pit traps lined with flaming pitch. Davos detailed shield walls interlaced with obsidian pikemen. Tormund volunteered to command the left flank of mountain clans. Bran spoke last. His voice rang thin, resonant. The weirwoods remember the first long night. They will lend us sight, but they require a sentinel, someone to stand within their dream and hold the gates until dawn. Eyes turned to Jon. He met his brother's calm gaze and shook his head. Not I. The sword must swing free, not root. Bran inclined his chin almost imperceptibly towards Sansa. A chill darted through Jon, yet his sister stepped forward before he could object. The wolf is not Fang alone, she said. Someone must be the heart. She slid a dirk from her belt and cut a line across her palm. Blood welled. She smoothed it over the weirwood mask perched above the hearth, crimson seeping into pale grain. I will be sentinel. Sister. Jon began, but she silenced him with a fierce glare. Lead, she said, and I will keep the gate unbarred. Outside the night split with a thunderous crack that rattled shutters. Windows blasted open under a gust of impossible cold. Snowflakes whirled inside like a host of white moths. Bran's chair trembled. He closed his eyes. They have breached the gorge, he whispered. 3 days sooner than expected. Jon drew breath, tasted ice as sharp as broken glass. Then we ride tonight. The army massed before midnight. 6,000 spears, half in furs, half in mantled mail that shimmered under moonlight. Direwolves wove through ranks, growls vibrating shields. Stone children scattered handfuls of obsidian dust into braziers until flames burned violet. Vale knights formed a shining wedge, bronze reflecting aurora swirling overhead like ghost fires. Sansa watched from the battlements beside the heart tree, her palm wrapped in linen. Luck laid her head on Sansa's boot, whining softly. Bran sat unmoving, eyes milky. Jon swung into saddle. Nymeria's rider guided the she-wolf to the fore. Jon raised Longclaw. Obsidian shards had been hammered into runic channels along its fuller, black veins glinting. Pack! He shouted, his voice rolling across stone like storm surf. Hunt! They thundered into the night. The Valley of Wolf's Mouth yawned ahead, mist rising from hot springs that bubbled beneath crusts of ice. Steam billowed, dancing with starlight. On the valley's far rim glimmered a horizon of pale figures, shoulder to shoulder, stretching beyond sight. Blue eyes blinked like frost candles. Above them rode the Night King on his skeletal horse, lance raised, crown of ice, luminous. Jon felt ghosts echo in his chest again, steadying the gallop of his heart. Wind whipped his cloak, rang the obsidian plates sewn to shoulder seams. He pointed Longclaw forward. Vale trumpets blared, wildling war horns resounded. Drums of stone children boomed like heartbeats deep under earth. The living surged, wolves leading, steam swirling around legs, banners snapping. The opposing line moved in dead silence, no drumbeat, only the creak of leather long frozen and the chink of mail crusted in rime. Snow devils spiraled around their feet. Frost spread across grass in their wake, killing tufts of winter-green moss where they crossed the warm vents. But as undead boots met steaming soil, the frost sizzled and retreated. The field itself rebelled against them. Collision rolled like thunder. Obsidian pikes impaled ragged breastplates. Dragonglass arrowheads burst skulls and blew fire. Wolves ripped frozen limbs and whirled on. The first rank fell, but the second clambered over bodies before flame faded. Jon carved through dead armored tall as Hodor, shards exploding from his blades' dark grooves. Each kill shivered warmth into his limbs. Ghosts, warmth. Yet the dead closed around their king like iron petals. Jon saw him raise a hand. Shattered lance replaced by a sword sculpted of ice, so pure it refracted moonlight into rainbows. He watched the Night King thrust the blade into the air, and the sky screamed. Crystals of inner cloud formed instantaneously, hailing down as spears of ice that harpooned men and wolf alike. Vale knights toppled from destriers, skewered. One wolf spun sideways, pinned through the haunch, howling until Jon's arrow ended her suffering. Bran's promise stirred in Jon's mind. The weirwoods lend us sight. He searched the swirling gloom for a tether. Through steam he glimpsed the crimson-leafed heart tree of Winterfell, miles away, yet its branches shook as though wind tore them. He felt Sansa watching through those leaves, every heartbeat of the field mirrored in her own chest. Hold the gate unbarred. He spurred his horse. Smashing through a knot of wights, Nymeria sprinting beside him, teeth snapping. Tormund's roar rose behind, free folk axes hewing a breach. Jon rode straight for the mounted king. Blue eyes settled on him, and a cold weight crushed Jon's lungs. Yet he kept on. 20 paces. 10. The air around the Night King rippled with murderous cold. Frost rimed Jon's beard in a breath. He swung Longclaw. The Night King parried. Ice met Valyrian steel with a shriek like glaciers colliding. Jon's arm burned. Longclaw jarred. Again he struck. Again the parry. Sparks of blue and midnight. Nymeria leapt for the horse's throat. The Night King twisted, palm splayed. A blast of wind hurled the she-wolf aside. She slammed into an ice chunk, yelped but surged upright. Jon lunged anew, faint, riposte. He scored a shallow slice across the Night King's cuirass. Blue cracks spidered outwards. Black stone embedded in Longclaw's fuller glimmered, reacting. The Night King cocked his head as though surprised. Jon pressed, hacking. With each strike, obsidian veins in the blade burned brighter. Then a howl rose, not from Nymeria, but a deeper, unearthly note that rolled from every hot vent, every crag, every pine bowl. Jon's heart seized. Out of swirling mist bounded a white silhouette, larger than memory, eyes ruby bright. Ghost but not flesh. Luminous, woven of moonlight and snow, paws steaming where they touched ground. Whites recoiled as if whipped. Ghost's phantom body rippled translucent, yet when he barreled into the Night King the impact sprayed hoarfrost like shattered glass. The Ice Monarch reeled. Jon saw, understood, spirit-clad in living flame gifted by weirwood vows. He dove, plunging Longclaw through the split in icy armor made by Ghost's strike. Obsidian screamed. The Night King's eyes widened. Blue turned white. Cracks radiated from the wound. He opened his mouth. No sound. Light flared within him, a fusion of winter and sorcery splitting at the seams. In that instant, Ghost howled into the frozen cavity, and sound became shattering. The Night King shattered like blown crystal. A concussive wave blasted outward, toppling whites in circles. Where shards hit earth they hissed, melting into puddles that steamed away. Silence fell, profound, broken only by the creak of armor plates slumping as puppets lost their strings. Thousands of whites collapsed, blades slipping from numb fingers, torsos crumbling. The army of the dead dissolved before the eyes of the living. Ghost's outline flickered. He looked at Jon, tongue lolling in a grin that was both wolf and something older. Jon reached, but his hand passed through light. The phantom wolf bowed his head once, turned, and raced across air toward the heart tree rimming the valley, each stride fainter until only moonlit snow gleamed where paws had been. Nymeria limped to Jon's side and pressed against him. He leaned on her and stared across the field. The living gaped, swords slack. Hurt and hope mingled in their eyes. Steam rose thicker now, like incense after prayer. By dawn, the sky burned rose gold. Survivors walked the battlefield salvaging arrows, whispering to the fallen. Obsidian pendants glinted on many chests. Jon oversaw pyres for the dead, man and wolf alike. Smoke curled into a cloudless heaven, no longer stolen by icy gales. Bran arrived carried by Mira and 2 Vale knights. He gazed upon the field with tranquil solemnity. "It is done?" Jon asked. "An ending," Bran answered. "Not all endings are final, but Winter's heart is broken." That night, a feast stretched the length of Winterfell's yard. Game stewed in cauldrons above the hot vents, mead served in stone children's skull mugs that Davos found odd but drank from anyway. Vale singers played lutes as free folk danced bear stomps that cracked frost from flagstones. Tormund flirted with a knight so shy she sputtered into her wine. Sam sat with Maester Walken, drafting a chronicle whose ink froze between sentences. Jon slipped away to the godswood where Sansa waited, cloak brushing red leaves that had not fallen even in deep winter. Luck sat at her feet, chewing a weirwood twig. Sansa rose as Jon approached, and words were unnecessary. He wrapped his arms around her. She pressed her face into his shoulder and they breathed as one. When they parted, she lifted his palm and traced the old scar where Ghost once nipped him as a pup. "He's not gone," she murmured. "I know," Jon said. "He runs in every breath I take." Branches sighed above. Somewhere in the dark a wolf howled, Nymeria calling the pack to roam the wild now cleansed of death. Other voices answered, new throats trying song for the first time. Jon listened until the sound became heartbeat, until the night grew calm, and the first fragile scent of thaw rode the air. Spring lay 1,000 labors away, yet it would come. The pack would see to that. Fresh buds the color of early jade peeked through the thaw-softened earth, outside Winterfell's shattered outer gate, as though the land itself tested whether it was safe to breathe again. When Jon Snow first noticed them, 5 timid shoots shivering in a pool of meltwater, he scarcely believed his eyes. "Spring," whispered the trembling green. Or perhaps only the dream of it. But even a dream could stir hearts after the endless hush of ice. He knelt in mud thick with ash, pressing thumb and forefinger into the dark soil, until cold seeped past his skin. Steam still drifted from the hot springs beneath the keep, coiling around the buds. He pictured warmth trickling upward through stone, coaxing the north to remember colors beyond white and gray. A raven flapped overhead, iridescence flickering on its wings. It cawed twice, an urgent note, before banking toward the rookery. Messages never ceased now. Every hour brought fresh parchment, appeals for aid, sightings of marauders, rumors of southern hosts testing the neck. The Night King was gone, but realms of men wasted no time filling the silence with quarrel. Footsteps squelched behind him. He stood, wiping soil from his leather breeches as Sansa approached, her cloak hem streaked with slush. She cradled a satchel against her ribs. Luck trotted beside her, tail plumed high. "Bran's asking for you in the solar," she said, voice low. Jon brushed mud from his gloves. "Is he well?" "As well as he ever is." She watched the buds. "Bran says these springs once fed groves of cherry trees. Grandmother told me the blossoms were pale pink like dawn." Jon imagined petals drifting on warm breeze, hard to reconcile with the ruins surrounding them. Charred palisade timbers, toppled siege engines now half buried in slush, shallow graves scarring the hillside. Yet the buds remained. He nodded toward her satchel. "Rations?" "Seeds," Sansa said. A spark glimmered in her frost-blue gaze. "Flame banked for too long. Turnips, flax, barley." The houses to the west lost nearly every grain store, but their soils richer than ours. When the ground softens, it'll send plow teams. Jon felt a ghost of a smile. "You sound more steward than queen." "We cannot eat titles," she answered. "And you are king in more than name now. Feeding the realm is crown's first duty." He touched the new circlet hidden under cloak folds, a band of hammered iron inset with a single chip of black glass. Light, practical, nearly plain enough to forget. But nothing about crowns allowed forgetting. He followed her through the gate, luck springing ahead. Direwolves padded above on the battlements, Nymeria with 2 gray sisters in her wake, scanning fields for stragglers. The wolves had grown leaner, less savage since the last battle, as if they too sensed violence withdrawing. But their watch remained ceaseless. People of the north slept easier for it. Within Winterfell's courtyard life thrummed like sap. Stone children carpenters shaped new gate leaves from spruce, singing guttural hymns that rose and fell like surf. Free folk toddlers squealed around a snowmelt pond where black brothers had set floating bowls of pitch to snuff leftover pyres. Vale masons inspected the broken tower foundations, bronze runes shining on their tool belts. Everywhere tiny miracles unfolded. A woman from Deepwood teaching a wildling how to spin wool. 2 Night's Watch recruits planting weirwood slips outside the smithy. Bear Island shield maidens brewing early nettle tea for the wounded. Jon wondered if any Southron herald could capture this tapestry of unlikely alliances. Perhaps only poets would remember. The solar smelled of tallow and damp vellum. Bran sat near the hearth, one hand resting on the carved arms of his chair, as though feeling pulse inside the wood. Mira Reed leaned at his shoulder. Davos Seaworth, Tormund Giantsbane, and Samwell Tarly waited in a loose crescent, faces uneasy. A small iron cage perched on the table, door open. Within it lay sparkling shards of translucent blue. Jon shut the door behind him. "What fragments are these?" "Trophies," Davos muttered, rubbing his gray stubbled jaw a wall. "From the shattered thing you slew." Sharper dread pricked Jon's gut. The pieces, no bigger than a child's marble, glimmered with inner frost that did not melt. Each pulse of hearthlight ran along facets like caught moonlight. Sam lifted one between thumb and forefinger. "I heated a sliver in an iron pan. It neither melted nor cracked. Bran suggests the magic that bound them is dormant, not dead." Bran's steady gaze met Jon's. "A cord severed may fray, but ends can be tied anew," the boy said. "Magic binds itself to cycles. Even death is a hinge, not a lock." Tormund growled. "Say it plain, tree gazer. Will the ice fiends rise again?" Bran closed his eyes. The great other is scattered across silence, his will undone. But shards are seeds. Jon exhaled. "Then we grind them to dust, cast dust to the sea." "Salt water alone cannot drown such memory," Bran warned. "Fire strong as dragonflame might." Tormund slapped the table. "Dragonflame we've not, but rumors say scaly beasts flap over the white knife. I'd tame one if I could." Jon's heart skipped. Sightings had persisted. Silhouettes against clouds, barns scorched in crooked patterns, shepherds swearing lambs vanished in cyclones of wind and heat. If dragons flew the north, whose command did they answer? Davos cleared his throat. Ravens from White Harbor confirmed 3 dragons circling the wolf's den, though none alight. Lord Manderley's men peppered them with quarrels, no harm done. "Dragons shrug at quarrels," Tormund snorted. "Do they carry riders?" Jon asked. Sam shook his head. "No living man claims to see a saddle." Bran's fingertips tensed on the chair. "The dragons search. They hunger for connection long severed." "Dendero." Jon felt something older than fear ripple inside him. An echo of Rhaegal's breath back when he taught the creature to calm on Dragonstone's cliffs. That dragon, and Viserion after his resurrection, were lost. Only Drogon survived Daenerys' fall, last rumors placing him east across the narrow sea. Yet 3 dragons now soared over Manderley ships. Impossible, unless other eggs had hatched, or legends of wild stock in the Shadowlands were half true, and they had migrated. "Regardless," Davos said, lifting his shoulders, "wild dragons threaten harvests and folk alike. Manderley begs we send help." "We have little to spare," Jon said. "But we must send something. Wyverns could undo all we rebuild." Tormund drew a half-smile. "We still have wolves." "Wolves are not wings," Jon answered. Sansa's entrance cut the tension. She carried her seed satchel and a wax-sealed letter. Lord Glover begs grain shipments by month's turn. She caught John's eye, and the silent conversation between them spanned seasons. Need, duty, wait. John faced the council. First task, these shards. Sam, gather every surviving mage's chronicle on ice spells. Davos, prepare a convoy to Dragonstone. Its fires still roar in the mines. Obsidian forge flames may suffice. Davos dipped his head. Second task. Dragons. Tormund, take 24 of our best trackers. Stone children among them. Follow flight paths, learn patterns, but no heroics. Report only. I'll sniff their dung if it keeps them from snatching babies, Tormund said. Third. Food. Jon turned to Sansa. You'll oversee distribution. But choose a new steward to aid you. The crown must delegate. Damn? Sansa's lips twitched somewhere between wry and weary. Already considered. Gilly volunteered. She keeps better ledgers than many born to the quill. Jon arched a brow at Sam, who flushed scarlet. She taught herself. Sam murmured, pride leaking through embarrassment. Bran's voice, though soft, carried finality. There's a fourth task. They all looked to him. The roots tell of shadows in the rivers of time. One such flows south. The capital stirs. Rumor swells fast, that a northern king wields wolf spirits and commands dragons. Some call you savior. Others, tyrant. The Iron Throne will not remain idle. Damn. Demtua. Jon crossed arms. Who now sits that throne? Cersei died in the collapse of the Red Keep. Rumors placed Myrcella's younger brother Tommen alive but hidden. Then came word of highborn claimants from the Reach. Interregnum, Davos said. A council of lords still argues lineage, but Gold Cloak side with whichever purse jingles loudest. Bran's pupils dilated. Another throne stirs, one not built of swords, but of whispers. He blinked. The citadel moves. Maesters debate naming a high archon over realms, deeming kings obsolete. Sansa scoffed. Maesters ruling kings. Their ink might freeze before our winter ends. Jon sighed. Ink or iron, both cut. We cannot fight every Southron squabble. Still, we must be ready if armies march. Mira spoke for the first time, her gray gaze steady. Reeds know the rivers. If southern knights cross the neck, we'll feel the ripples. I'll leave at dawn. Jon inclined his head. Go with thanks. The meeting dispersed. Sam and Gilly hurried away arm in arm, Gilly already outlining ledgers. Davos summoned captains to ready sails. Tormund clapped Jon's shoulder, beard quivering with anticipation of dragon tracking. Bran remained by the hearth, Mira whispering to him. Sansa lingered, waiting until the room emptied. Brother, she began, you carry too many tasks yourself. Wolves share carcasses, kings must share burdens. He leaned against the table, runic wolf claws cool beneath fingers. If I do less, someone suffers. Someone always suffers, she said gently. We choose which sufferings we lessen. He looked at her, saw faint purple beneath her eyes. She slept as rarely as he. What burden will you claim next? A small exhale. I intend to wed. The words silenced the hearth, crackle in his mind. To whom? No bannerman. She said quickly. A union not of love, though I hope trust may grow, but of realms. The Vale offers knights, the Reach grain. Yet I turn to White Harbor. Lord Manderley has grandsons, but he suggested Davos' son as match. Devon. Jon considered. Loyal, humble, bred on ships. A good heart. No. A stitch between north and sea, Sansa said. Manderley will supply fleets, Glover grain from port trade. The marriage could anchor alliances. Jon nodded slowly. If your heart agrees, I support you. But no union should chain you again. Never. Chains break. she said, her smile slight but fierce. I learned how. They embraced. Her cloak smelled of cedar and early thaw. Jon's chest eased for a heartbeat. In that hush, he heard a faint, distant cry. The note of a dragon? Or memory? Hard to tell through stone walls. Davos convoy left at dawn, wagons creaking under obsidian shards and ice splinters. Tormund and his scouts vanished west on shaggy garons. Stone children bounding barefoot across crusted snow. Mira rode south with 2 reed cousins, frog spears strapped to saddles. Winterfell's yard felt hollow without their bustle, yet new labors filled the space. Forges hammering nails for Manderley's shipyards, healers teaching poultice craft, children running foot races between wolf sentries. Jon spent daylight drilling recruits, Karstark lads alongside wildling girls. He sparred until arms trembled, until repetition replaced thought. Ghost's absence weighed heavy at twilight, when he'd once walked ramparts with the White Wolf at heel. Now Nymeria often accompanied him. Though bonded to another, she seemed to sense the emptiness. She'd lean against his thigh while he surveyed horizon lines for enemy columns, and found only the hush of receding winter. On the 6th night after the council, Bran summoned him again. He found the boy in the godswood beneath the heart tree, crimson leaves whispering round pale trunk. Snowmelt pooled on gnarled roots. The roots feel tremors, Bran said before Jon spoke. A shape approaches, born of fire, tempered by grief. She rides alone. Jon's pulse kicked. A dragon? Yes, one scarred by blackened iron and memories of chains. Jon felt old wounds open beneath his ribs. Drogon. Bran's voice softened. And the rider who falls within no shadow but her own. Jon stepped back. Visions he'd buried beneath duty surged upward. Daenerys' ashen face as he held her in the ruin of a throne room. Blood soaking into stone. Drogon keening in despair before carrying her west. Reports seized on rumor. Some said dragon and queen vanished into sunset. Others swore they never crossed sea cliffs. He had chosen not to chase ghosts, focusing on those alive. Yet now the past flew on obsidian wings. When? He asked. Tomorrow by first light. She seeks Winterfell. Shock mingled with fear. Alive? Changed, Bran murmured. But alive. Jon's knees threatened to buckle, but training steadied him. Have you told Sansa? I will, Bran said. Yet speak first to your heart. Jon walked north of the keep until pines swallowed torchlight. Snow underfoot reflected stars. He tried to parse what he felt. Joy? Dread? He recalled the look in Daenerys' eyes as he plunged the dagger. Betrayal? Sorrow? Love? That love had not protected innocence beneath dragonfire. How could he face her again? And yet she had returned, perhaps forgiven? Or seeking vengeance? Drogon would not forgive easily. He unsheathed Longclaw and stared at reflection in dark steel. Ghost's spirit thrummed faint beneath obsidian veins. The blade's edge shone honest. Whatever dawn brought, he would meet it with open hands, not stained by fear. First light. A boom like distant thunder jolted Winterfell awake. Jon raced up the broken tower stair. Frost-laden wind tore his cloak. Over western hills a silhouette sliced the sun's rim. A massive shape, membrane wings catching dawn. Snow burst in his chest. Drogon larger than memory, scales washed in ember red and coal black. Upon his neck rode a figure cloaked in pale fur, hair silver white, streaming like comet tail. Bells clanged. Archers scrambled. Jon barked orders. Hold arrows. Lower scorpions. He knew Nymeria could scent his urgency because she bayed, nipping at spearmen's heels to force them back. Fear rippled through the yard until his voice cut. Stand down. Drogon descended, wing beats hammering air. Snow swirled into vortices. Horses reared. The dragon hovered, talons churning earth, before settling inside the outer ring where pyres once burned whites. Steam hissed around his claws. His gold-red eyes fixed on Jon. Recognition? Maybe, maybe not. The rider dismounted in a fluid slide, fur cloak billowing. She pulled back her hood. Daenerys Targaryen. Her face was leaner, angles sharpened, silver hair streaked with carbon strands, but eyes still shimmered violet. A livid scar crept along her left collar, diving beneath tunics. Blade-wound Jon knew intimately. She approached, footfalls muffled in slush. No guards barred her. Nymeria stood watchful, but unmoving. Jon stepped forward. Each breath felt carved from ice. Words refused to shape. When they met, a pace apart, he saw pain flicker in her eyes, then something like relief beneath. She swallowed. King in the north. His throat tightened. Your grace. Silence brimmed between them, thick with memory. Around them wolves growled low. Soldiers murmured. Drogon's breath smoked. Daenerys allowed her gaze to drift along ramparts, the tree, the people, finally returning to Jon. I came for truth, she said, voice raspier, yet still melodic. And to end a debt. Debt? You gave me death. She answered. Now I return life. She reached into satchel hidden by cloak, producing a dragon egg, black, veined silver. She cradled it, gesture tender. From clutch laid in Valyria. Drogon led me to it. Jon stared, stunned. She extended it toward him, but when he made no move, she stepped closer, raising free hand. Fingers brushed his chest where dagger once plunged her heart. Ghost walks in you, she whispered. I felt him guide Drogon across leagues of wind. A wolf spirit sang, and the dragon listened. Heat lit Jon's ribs, Ghost's echo flared, as if acknowledging her words. Jon closed hands around the egg, its surface pulsing warm. Why give this to me? Fire destroyed cities on my command, she said, voice trembling. I vowed never again. If dragons live, they must answer hearts stronger than mine. Mendemniciar. I am no dragon lord, Jon murmured. Daenerys' eyes softened, sorrowful, knowing. You are of dragon blood and wolf both. You bridged ice and fire when the world most needed it. The egg will choose its hour, but I trust your guard. He weighed the gift. Literal weight, heavy and alive, and heavier still in implication. Should a new dragon hatch, its loyalties could shape Eris. Yet refusing would bind them both to old grief. Before he answered, a cry sounded from rampart scouts. 2 more dragons wheeled overhead, smaller than Drogon yet formidable. 1 sea green, 1 dusk gold. They circled but did not land. Jon felt the yard tremble with awe. Daenerys looked skyward, eyes reflecting scaled shapes. Rael and Varaxis, she named them quietly. Hatched 2 moons past. They followed Drogon. Jon managed a breath. Then the world has 3 dragons again. Not mine, she clarified. I guide them, not command. They are wild. They guard me because Drogon willed it. And Drogon follows? He left question open. Her lips curved, a smile frail but real. Old friendship. They stood amid swirling hush. Jon lifted the egg. If I accept, I share its burden with you. No kingdom alone may hold fire this fierce. She nodded. Shared flame then. Sansa entered the yard flanked by Bran in his wheeled seat. Soldiers parted. Her eyes assessed Daenerys. Cool, caution. Bran's expression read deeper currents. He whispered something to Sansa. She inclined her head. Jon turned to Daenerys. Come inside. We will speak as allies or adversaries. Let truth sort path. She exhaled visible relief. Drogon crouched as she touched his snout. A soft rumble vibrated stones. She followed Jon beneath gate arches and to keep shadows punctured by early sunlight. The north watched, restless. They convened in the great hall, now hung with fresh rushes, banners of wolf and moon interlaced. Daenerys stood before roaring hearth, steam rising from cloak edges. Jon removed his crown, cold metal stung palm, and placed it on table beside dragon egg. Counselors assembled. Sansa at Jon's right, Bran fronting the weirwood mask, Davos newly returned from harbor, sea salt flecking beard, Sam clutching scrolls, Tormund smelling of campfires, Lady Lyanna Mormont fierce in bear claw mantle. Even stone children and voice knelt in archway, curious eyes shining. Nymeria lay near Daenerys, head on paws. Daenerys met every gaze without flinching. "You know my crimes," she began. Voice echoed across rafters. "I burned King's Landing, believing it rotten root to stem. Innocents died. I paid with sword through heart." She touched scar. Death cleansed illusions. Drogon carried me where winds whispered hard truths. I saw realms reeling from my fire. Children orphaned, fields charred. I vowed to undo what I wrought. She swept gaze across hall. But armies still gather, south and east. Some worship me as fire made flesh, calling for war. Others brand me butcher to slay on sight. I chose exile. Yet rumors reached me of a king who wields wolves to guard the realm. I flew north seeking either judgment or harbor, whichever he offered. Murmurs rippled. Lyanna Mormont stood small but stalwart. Your flames scorched northern sons in Lannister ranks. Why should we trust you? Daenerys inclined head. You should not. Trust must be earned, not demanded. She bared forearm, runes scarred into skin, symbols of Kiskari penance. Each village I wronged marked me. I carry weight of ashes. Bran's distant gaze sharpened. Ash is fertile after rain. What seeds will you sow? Mercy, she answered. Sansa's brow arched. Mercy alone cannot rebuild roads, feed mouths, house widows. Then I offer dragon muscle to transport stone, dragon flame to forge plowshares from swords, dragon wings to ferry grain across seas. Dragons must eat, Davos noted. Drogon hunts whale pods far offshore, she said. Spares livestock if I ask. The young will follow his example so long as prey remains. Sam cleared throat, stepping forward. Your Grace, have you studied texts on dragon courtesy? Dragons imprint on behavior. If commanded to spare, they may. But wild hearts still test fences. Thou. Daenerys acknowledged with transparent humility. Teach me, Samwell Tarly. I welcome guidance. Jon watched exchange, heart taut. He saw suspicion in Sansa, wonder in Sam, wary hope in council at large. Yet decision fell to him. He grasped egg, warmth seeping. The North aims for peace. If dragons lend fire to healing, I accept this alliance. On conditions. Name them, Daenerys said. First, dragons never strike settlements without consent of council appointed by northern houses, the free folk, and stone children. Agreed. Second, you answer for past. Families bereaved may confront you. You will listen and aid reparations. She lowered eyes. I will face them. Third, if hatching occurs, the hatchling is sworn jointly to North, and whatever realm emerges from Southron chaos dedicated to peace. No conquest. She hesitated, not pride but weighing. So sworn. Jon set egg down. Then let new fires light new roads. Hush lingered before Sansa stepped forward. We will host a moot at midsummer. Houses and peoples will send envoys. Dragons may circle but not land near villages without herald. Agreed? Daenerys smiled faintly. Wisdom sits in Winterfell, I see. Agreed. Bran's voice drifted. Threads weave stronger when willing hearts knot them. Path ahead still climbs storm towers, yet seed already sprouts. He looked to Jon. Guard it. Jon inclined head. Days blurred with new undertakings. Dragons perched on snow-dusted crags beyond Godswood, their roars rolling over hills, startling deer herds. Northerners approached cautiously. Daenerys supervised demonstrations, Drogon melting iron gates into plow blades. Viraxis fanning grain barges, across shivering sea to White Harbor. Rael roasting fallen white carcasses, unearthed by thaw to cleanse dread from soil. Children laughed where once they screamed. Torment returned with tale of chasing dragons across White Knife Delta, nearly roasting his beard when Viraxis dove for salmon. He recounted exploits in tavern, morale high. Davos sailed south again. Shards sealed in lead casks bound for dragonstone furnaces. Bran communed with Weirwood network, eyes milky hours at a time. Stone children shared obsidian dust salves that staunched infection. Sansa negotiated grain routes. Her engagement to Devon Seaworth announced. White Harbor erupted in revelry. And Jon trained side by side with Daenerys, teaching recruits how to signal dragons with mirrored shields, how to calm wolves with steady breath. They spoke little of the past, but grief hovered, a quiet sentinel. Some nights Jon walked to Rampart where Ghost once sat. Daenerys joined him, silent. They watched Aurora sweep across sky, dragons silhouetted against green veils. Once he murmured, "I thought I killed you." She answered, "You killed the person I was. I bear no malice." Tears glistened, caught firelight. She let them fall. Spring seeped deeper. Buds beneath gate unfurled into small leaves, bright and fragile. Blackbirds nested among red leaves of heart tree. Melting snow uncovered cairns of fallen, lichen already claiming stone. Peace felt tenuous, like glass cooled too quickly, but it held. Then, a fortnight before midsummer moot, ravens arrived in a storm. One bore Tommen Baratheon's seal. The boy king, puppet of Tyrell Reach coalition, demanded Jon's fealty and immediate dragon tithe or face crusade of 7 armies bound by Old Town's Maester Conclave. Another raven carried parchment smelling of roses and dust. Dorne's Princess Nymeria Sand urging Northern King to join Southern Free Alliance resisting Maester rule. A third, its wax cracked, warned of ironborn fleets under Asha Greyjoy looting East Coast towns, emboldened by rumors of dragons too busy sowing seeds to breathe fire. Council reconvened at once. Davos set maps. Silverhill Highgarden, Horn Hill, Old Town. They've marshaled 40,000 under Maester banners. Claim divine right of knowledge to tame dragon threat. Their spies track reports of Drogon roosts. Tormund cracked knuckles. We smash them. Wolves and fire make short feast. Sansa countered. War drains storehouses. The realm needs plows, not pyres. Daenerys crossed arms. Yet if they march, we must answer. Jon rubbed forehead. We cannot fight 3 wars. Reach, Iron Islands, and bandit raids at once. Nor hinge realm on dragons alone. Then Bran spoke. A third path runs between swords. Truth exposed. The Maester's power lies in parchment and whispered fear. Shine bright light. Shadows scatter. Sam brightened. We could publish full chronicles of these shards, reveal the Maester's withheld prophecy for centuries. Laid before lords it erodes their claim, Davos said. But Old Town will call it forged. Sansa. Not if witnesses speak. We have stone children, Night's Watch, wildlings, Vale Knights, dragons themselves. Now well. Daenerys added softly, and a queen risen from death. Jon's gaze sharpened. You would stand before Southron lords who want your head. She lifted chin. A sovereign must face storms. Besides, she glanced toward roof where distant roar sounded. I do not stand alone. Quiet settled, heavy as promise. Jon nodded. Then we ride to Great Weir Bridge, halfway to Moat Cailin. Host moot there midsummer, but invite Southron claimants too. Expose shards. Share truths, show dragons, serve peace. Perhaps we avert blood. And now. Tormund snorted but shrugged assent. If they refuse, wolves still have fangs. Preparations devoured weeks. Caravans rolled out laden with banners and brew casks, dragging glass sculptures to gift visiting lords. Sansa oversaw tents along riverbank, each assigned per house, Tyrell gold, Martell copper, Greyjoy black. Bran practiced weaving illusions through weirwood saplings to deter assassins. Sam and Stone Children scribes duplicated scrolls revealing maester manipulations, tracing back to Century of Blood, citing hidden prophecies. Dragons patrolled sky. Wolves roamed camps at night. Hope and dread intertwined like climbing vines around every heart. The morning of Moot dawned beneath sky clear as polished steel. Jon rode at head of procession, Direwolves preceding, banners whipping. Wolf and Moon, three-headed dragon behind, bear, trident, reed, bronze falcon. At his side Daenerys on a pale mare, raven hair braided with obsidian beads. Sansa riding dapple gray behind them. Bran in wheeled cart pulled by luck, and two gray wolves harnessed specially. The sight stirred, murmured prayers among onlookers. They reached Great Weir Bridge by noon. Tents bright as wildflowers dotted floodplain. Lords milled under banners. Common folk thronged ridge to watch. Tommen's host glittered across river, gold cloaks. Tyrell roses adorning bright standards. Maesters in dove gray lined their ranks. Ironborn ships anchored downstream. Sea dragon prows grim. Dorne's banners snapped flame-like, sun and spear defiant. Jon signaled archers to hold. He advanced alone across bridgestones warmed by sun, facing Tommen's envoy, Sir Garland Tyrell, helm plume nodding. Youthful king remained in carriage beyond. Sir Garland bowed. King Tommen claims sovereignty over 7 kingdoms. He welcomes parley but demands Queen Daenerys yield dragons for maester stewardship to prevent further calamity. Jon's replying voice carried. Dragons are free. They will not bend to chains. But their riders pledge peace. Will Tommen break bread or brandish steel? Garland hesitated. Maester Walgrave approached. Scroll unfurled. Council of Archons decrees dragon threat unacceptable. History proves. History you rewrote, Sam declared, stepping forward clutching scroll stack. He flung them open. Your order burned prophecies, erased evidence of White Walkers, delayed warnings. Here lies proof. He passed copies to lords. Stone Children presented obsidian splinters, demonstrations of cold flame within when touched by blood. Maesters gasped. Tension rippled. Sansa addressed queenly voice. Do you name yourselves guardians when you hide truths that cost tens of thousands? We invite open counsel, no throne above others. Onlookers murmured. Dornish princess strode near, gleaming copper armor. Dorne listens. Asha Greyjoy sauntered from Ironborn's side, grin sharp. If dragons haul iron ore to our foundries, we'll forge plows, not axes. Maybe. Debate erupted. Voices clashing like swords yet stopping short of blood. Then sky darkened as Drogon descended, wings eclipsing sun. Rael and Varaxis flanked him. Dragons hovered overhead, sunlight bathing their scales in molten hues. Fear swept ranks, but Drogon landed gently on River Island, lowering neck. Daenerys climbed onto Snout, standing tall. Her words boomed, carried by dragon roar channel. I burned a city. I will not burn another. But if any threaten this realm with lies and greed, dragons will stand with North and every free people. Kneel if you choose. Rise if you dare. But do not crawl behind scrolls and whisper doom. For we have survived doom and sing still. None. Silence. Flags snapped. Tommen stepped from carriage, boy no older than 14, eyes wide. He looked at Drogon, then at Jon, fear mixing with longing. Slowly he walked across bridge, past stunned guards, until he faced Jon. Tommen Baratheon, Jon said. Do you come to conquer? The boy shook head. I come to learn how to protect my people from cold things and warmongers. Jon offered hand. Tommen took it. Across camps. Swords lowered. A ripple ran, like ice fracturing under thaw. Maester Walgrave sputtered, but others among his order turned pages of Sam's scrolls, brows furrowing. Seeds of doubt planted. Ironborn cheered talk of trade. Dornish princess proposed council of equal thrones. Reach envoys whispered of grain caravans north. Conversation spread like sunrise. As day waned, lords signed the Weir Compact. Pledge of mutual defense, open archives, ban on dragon hunting, sharing of forges for plows and arms only against unnatural threat. Not all signed, some stormed out, yet enough ink flowed to shift balance. Walgrave left muttering. But knowledge had breached walls. That evening, bonfires lined river. Musicians of half a dozen regions wove tunes together, rhythms clashing then melding. Jon watched from bluff. Daenerys joined, facelit amber by flames. She offered cups of nettle wine. He accepted. "They look to you," she said, nodding at revelers. "To us," he corrected. "Do you forgive me?" Her voice trembled like wind in blossoming cherry. He answered honestly, "Not yet. But I walk that road." She nodded, tears bright. "I will walk beside you even in silence." They turned toward music. Drogon lounged on sandbar, wing draped over smaller dragons. Nymeria patrolled, luck bounding at her heels. Bran sat beneath young weirwood planted near bridge, eyes half closed. Above, sky flooded with stars. Aurora danced faint, no longer frantic, but gentle ribbons of jade and violet. Jon sensed ghost curling in his chest, warm. He looked at the bud of cherry in night's pocket, and knew seasons turned by courage of tender shoots daring hard earth. Wolves guard them, dragons warm them. Men must choose to nurture or scorch. He lifted cup to dawn's promise invisible beyond night's cloak. "To seeds," he whispered. Daenerys echoed. And far north, in tundras left empty by death, fresh grass sprouted where ghostly pawprints once glowed, each blade reaching for light, fearless beneath watchful constellations. The hush before dawn settled over the vast encampment, like a final benediction after revels. Tendrils of smoke from 100 dying cookfires curled into the lightning sky, carrying with them the scents of honeyed grain, salt pork, and the spilt mead of careless victory. Jon Snow stirred from half-sleep, beneath a rough-spun blanket outside his command tent, the cool breath of the river brushing his face. Nearby, the slow bellows of a sleeping direwolf pup. Luck rose and fell, her small ribs expanding against his boot leather. The night's music still echoed faintly in his ribs, but new sounds crept in now. The scuff of early sentries, the shuffle of scribes collecting discarded flagons to be melted into inkpots, the half-whispered prayers of stone children, greeting the sun with palms dusted in obsidian ash. Jon eased upright. Armor creaked. He had not removed breastplate or boots before dropping to the bedroll. Trust came only so far, even beneath a banner of truce. The moot's fragile accord felt like glass cooled too quickly, liable to splinter at the faintest wrong note. He pushed aside the blanket, careful not to wake Luck. Her ears flicked anyway. One sleepy eye opened, then she collapsed again into the warmth left by his body. Across the clearing, ghost-white steam coiled over the river where dragons had drunk hours earlier. Their silhouettes now lined the eastern ridge, Drogon, magnificent and motionless, but for the slow furl of his wingtips. Rael perched high, scanning. Viraxis curled like a massive cat, tail flickering languidly through meadow reeds. As sunlight kissed the horizon, each beast stretched, sending ripples of color through dark scale. Wine red and coal, green shot with tourmaline, and deep dusk gold like buried treasure flushed with dawn. Daenerys stood alone on the opposite bank, cloak furled around her slender frame, silver hair turned pewter in the gray pre-light. She faced the water, palms open. Jon crossed the pontoon without sound. Pebbles underfoot shifted. Rael's head lifted, but the dragon tasted his scent on the breeze and lowered back, unthreatened. He halted a pace from Daenerys. Mist pearled the scar on her throat. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice graveled by dawn chill. "I dreamt of bells," she murmured, gaze fixed on the water's mirror. "And of wings over them." The bells never stopped. "Dreams cling," he said. "But dawn washes them thin." "Not always." She turned then, violet eyes shadowed yet steady. "I told myself I would stand beneath this sky without burning it, and here I am. That should soothe me. Still, the bells keep ringing." Jon reached for her hand, hesitated, and let the gesture become a mere twitch. "We'll forge new sounds," he said instead, softer than he meant. Songs of fields rising and children laughing too loud. She studied him, and something eased in her shoulders. "I envy your faith." "It's not faith," he replied. "It's stubbornness. Northerners survive blizzard seasons by believing spring exists somewhere beyond the white. They have to." She smiled, an awkward slip of expression that nevertheless warmed the thin air. "Teach me the art of northern stubbornness, then. I may need it." Her gaze shifted past him. "Your sister approaches." Sansa strode across the bridge, flanked by 2 Bear Island spearwives. She carried a ledger under one arm and a bundle of folded parchment under the other. The frost in her hair betrayed a morning spent inspecting fields for encampment damage. She inclined her head courteously to Daenerys, then focused on Jon. "Ravens arrived," she said without preamble. "The Reach contingent who left yesterday never returned to Highgarden. Scouts tracked them south only to find their banners shredded near Bitterbridge. No bodies, no mounts." Daenerys frowned. "Kidnapped. Or defected," Sansa said. Ironborn sails were spotted drifting upriver with the current. No oars, abandoned. "Something moves under cover of these talks." Jon's jaw set. "Dato. Sabotage. Or worse." Sansa handed him a sealed scrap. "From Tommen. He's received threats. Silver roses with petals dipped in blood. Signed only with a quill's nib. The maesters keep close counsel." Daenerys exhaled. "A faction among them aims to break the compact before ink dries." Jon nodded. "They fear dragons more than they value truth." He met Sansa's level stare. "Summon council." Within the hour, the great pavilion, its inner poles repurposed ship masts, canvas dyed pure northern gray, filled again with the uneasy coalition. Tommen arrived escorted by Garland Tyrell and a slender septa whose hazel eyes seldom blinked. Dornish envoys lounged like coiled serpents along silk cushions near the central brazier. Asha Greyjoy slouched by the wine casks, sea smoke still clinging to her leathers. Even a senior maester, lean, pale Walgrave, took a seat, though his pin of office hung lopsided as if solder had melted overnight. Bran sat nearest the doorway, luck curled at his feet. His eyes drifted between waking and the ether of weirwood roots, gathering whispers no human ear could hear. Next to him, Stone Children representatives, Dale and Yurg, clacked bone pendants, the sound rhythmic, soothing. Jon stood at the center. No dais, no throne. A simple war map lay rolled on the table, but remained unopened. During the night, he began, forces unknown seized or slaughtered a traveling party inscribed to this council. That alone breaks the compact's first oath. Safe passage. We must discover who wields secret knives before trust fractures. Bah! Eyes darted, accusations buzzed unsaid. Tommen's voice trembled yet held. "My lords, my mother bled our realm with secrets. I won't walk that road. If there's conspiracy among Old Town's order, I must know." Walgrave rose, robes trailing dust. His grace misreads caution. "Our guild preserves knowledge. We question dragon might not through treachery, but scholarship." Asha snorted. "Scholarship doesn't string men up and paint roses red." "Nor do Ironborn," Walgrave snapped. Asha raised brow. "If we'd taken them, we'd hang their bones on prow. No mystery." Dornish Princess Nymeria tapped jeweled finger to lips. "Perhaps we waste breath chasing shadows. The Reach lads might have staged abduction themselves to sabotage treaty. Their houses profit on candle wax and scroll parchment. Chaos sells counsel dearly." Tension ratcheted like drawn bowstring. Jon spread hands, tamping it down. "Supposition breeds blades. We need proof. Tormund scouts have sign of hoof tracks leading inland beyond the tree line. They'll follow trail. Meanwhile, no party leaves camp unescorted by mixed guard. One north, one Reach or Dorne, one maester, one Ironborn. Balance breeds honesty." "Ben?" Murmurs of reluctant assent followed. Tommen nodded to Walgrave. The maester's jaw tensed, but he bowed stiffly. Daenerys stepped forward, winter sunlight flicking cobweb silver off her hair. Dragons will patrol sky. If abductors move, we'll see. Walgrave flinched. Garland Tyrell coughed politely. With respect, my lady, it may terrify small folk in farmsteads. They'll frighten no one if riders bear the new peace banner and drop grain when landing, Daenerys said. Let them witness fire that cooks bread instead of war. Her poise disarmed some, but not all. Yet, dissent dulled, under collective exhaustion. Jon dismissed council to duties. Noon's sun gleamed, coaxing fragrance from budding meadows. Jon rode with Daenerys and a mixed patrol. Bear Island spears, Tyrell lancers, 2 maesters with quills tucked behind ears, and stone child trackers barefoot on muleback. Rael, and Daenerys atop Drogon, shadowed overhead, casting a scythe of shade across blooming heather. They traced the missing party's supposed route. Wheel ruts skewed toward deep bush, hoof prints cut at irregular intervals, as though horses spook. Spear shafts snapped and left like breadcrumb runes. A shred of gold-embroidered cloak fluttered from a branch. Stone Child Dale dismounted, nose close to soil. Not ironborn, he rasped, voice muffled behind his mask of cured goat hide. Tack nails show reach make, but blood. He pointed where dark crust, freckled leaf, mixed with black resin. Pine tar, Jon muttered. Used to seal ships or to coat torch arrows? Daenerys peered into gloom. Could they be building something to burn? A rustle. 3 bolts hissed out of low scrub. Jon's shield rose instinctively. 1 bolt ricocheted. Another sank into Tyrell Lancer's thigh. 3rd pierced Dale's shoulder. He snarled but remained upright. The patrol wheeled. Jon glimpsed hooded figures retreating deeper along a ravine choked with deadfall. He signaled pursuit, but Daenerys called Drogon's scream. The ground shook under a sudden hurricane of wing. The assailants froze, fear rooting them. Soldiers closed, dragging 4 emaciated figures into the open. None seemed older than 20. Under torn cloaks, they wore patched septon robes over leather studded with sharpened quills. Walgrave's assistant, Maester Clary, recognized the sigil stitched to a sleeve. A black quill dripping red. Scribe's bane, he whispered. The clandestine fist of the most devout. Fanatics who purge knowledge they deem heresy. His face drained. But they were dissolved generations ago. Daenerys dismounted, eyes flint. YC's reach envoys. 1 prisoner spat. Parchments they carried would shackle realm to dragon tyranny. We deliver realm into purifying void. Walgrave blanched. Jon stepped forward. Void has frozen once already. Ice left by your ignorance nearly ended all life. No more. He turned to guards. Bind them with honor chains. We'll hold tribunal at dusk. Evening. The tribunal convened under open sky before a river. Torches flickered. Dragons perched sentinel along dark ridge. Silent silhouettes. Prisoners knelt within circle of mixed lords and small folk chosen by lot. Bran presided, luck at his lap, eyes shining silver as stars above. Maester Walgrave, shaken, testified first, disclaiming any sanction by the Citadel. His quill-thin voice trembled. Stonechild Urg recounted pursuit, pointing out poison vials found on prisoners, oil to set parchments ablaze. Garland Tyrell read aloud. Scroll listing names of lords who would have been framed by forged confessions contained in those stolen documents, plans to implicate Dorne, Iron Islands, and parts of the North in sorcery. Gasps rippled as each new plot unfolded. When testimony ceased, Bran's clear, quiet voice fell like snowfall. Guilt is roots sunk deep. Yet a blade may cut root and tree may still regrow, twisted or true. He turned to prisoners. Will you relinquish creed that sanctifies lies? The eldest fanatic lifted head. Fire cleanses. You consort with dragons and demons with skin changers. We fear no sentence. Bran's eyelids lowered. So be it. He looked to Jon. Jon exhaled. Execution in fresh times of peace risked martyrdom. Yet leniency might invite fresh blades. He stepped back, inviting voices. Sansa spoke first. Exile to Skagos, where stone children will watch them. They will learn to revere the obsidian network they sought to destroy. The stone children nodded solemnly. Exile to land of god tears a fitting penance. Prisoners paled. Jon accepted. So judged. Daenerys raised her hand. Make them rebuild the books they burned. She faced Walgrave. Citadel must preserve all tongues, even those that scorch ears. Walgrave bowed. The Archons will adopt this tenet. Faithless eyes of the prisoners finally cracked. Fear replaced zeal. They were led away, murmuring prayers swallowed by dragons' low rumble. As night drifted, Jon joined Daenerys at the fireline. She stared at sparks climbing sky. Every choice weighs, she murmured. Had you asked for their heads, I would have given them, but exile felt heavier. Blood begets blood, Jon said. A poorer crop than barley. She considered him. When I burned Lannister soldiers outside King's Landing, I thought fear would plant loyalty. It only sowed emptiness. You make space for hope instead. He shrugged, uncomfortable. We'll see what grows. Silence settled companionably. Wind shifted. Drogon stretched, limbs cracking. He snorted a plume. Embers whirled like fireflies. Jon felt impulse stir, a question long coiled. What woke you? He asked. From death. Her lashes lowered. She knelt to gather a coal, cupping flickering light. When daggers struck, there was darkness. Endless, silent. I floated with ghosts of cities I burned. But then a sound reached me. One howl, echoing across black. A wolf's cry. It called again and again, stubborn as you say. I followed. Light bloomed green, not red. I opened my eyes on Drogon's back above a summer sea gale. Jon's breath hitched. Ghost was flesh no longer. Yet spirit moves on winds. She opened her fingers. Coal's glow danced across her pupils. I owe that wolf my breath. She set the ember down. And perhaps you owe the wolf your crown. He could not answer. Instead, he drew the dragon egg from satchel at his hip. Under starlight its veins pulsed faint electric blue. It quickens, he whispered. I feel heartbeats sometimes. Daenerys touched shell. It listens. When ready, flame will crack stone. He slipped egg back. If it hatches, Ryder will need forging. Her lips curled. Do you volunteer? Ryder must not crave flames, he said. Maybe the dragon chooses whole pack, not one. She chuckled softly. A dragon with a council on its back. Imagine the squabbles. Across camp, new hush swept. Horns blew thrice. Scouts raced with news. Iron-borne longships aflame on the river. Dock moorings cut. Fleet drifting ablaze toward tents. Asha Greyjoy cursed and sprinted. Jon and Daenerys exchanged glance. Shared recognition of fragile peace, got stabbed by another unseen hand. They ran. Flames licked high along mastheads, sails crackling into embers that rained on canvas roofs. Men and women hauled water skins. Stone children tossed obsidian dust that smothered fire with black smoke. Dragons took wing. Drogon swept low once, beating giant fans of wind that snuffed half the blazes in a roar. On far bank chaotic shapes darted. Cloaked figures vanished into sedge. Jon signaled archers. Arrows hissed. One cloaked form fell, struggling. Nymeria's gray cousin pounced, dragging captive out. Jon sprinted across makeshift plank, sword drawn. Captured assailant proved shockingly small. A girl perhaps 13. Eyes wild. Under cloak. She wore novice robes of the citadel. Pale gray. Strapped to her waist a clay jar labeled in High Valyrian. Ethereal naphtha. She hissed at Jon like feral cat. Knowledge belongs to no dragon. Sansa arrived, breath frosting. Her gaze softened briefly at the girl's age but steeled quickly. More scribe's bane, or new blade. Walgrave, hunched nearby, grimaced. Initiates indoctrinated by rogue archmaesters. We must weed root and branch. Jon knelt. Why burn ships? To drive Ironborn to blame dragons. She spat. To shatter moot, chaos births order. Tears welled. Fanatic courage cracked. The realm cannot abide beasts. He promised would be healers of nations. Jon's voice gentled. Who? She bit lip, then whispered. Archmaester Belgrave, the quill that drips red. Walgrave gasped. Belgrave vanished years ago, rumored lost to Essos. He sagged. He always argued that magic belongs in chains of lead. Daenerys exhaled smoke she'd inhaled near flames. Belgrave may still scheme. These children are knives he throws. Jon addressed girl. No one will harm you, but we must end your master's plots. She sobbed, not in relief, but as one waking from nightmare. The moot extended another fortnight under heavy guard, while Asha rebuilt charred docks. Dornish and Tyrell craftsmen forged first barge named Wolf's Flame, plating hull with dragon-tempered iron. Sam and Bran traced Belgrave's coded correspondences, purchased by unscrupulous Korth merchants, and pinpointed his rumored base near Old Town's ruin-scarred quarter. Tommen dispatched gold cloaks loyal to New Order, but wary of infiltration. He asked Jon for impartial escort. Jon agreed on condition, mission led by mixed team. Tyrell Knights, Bear Island Shield Maidens, Stone Children Scouts, and a dragon overhead. Daenerys insisted on accompanying Drogon, though Jon argued risk. She silenced him with hand on forearm. I once burned Old Town sky, turning south toward vengeance. I will return bearing justice. They departed dawn 3 weeks after the fires. Jon remained behind, crown heavy. He and Sansa facilitated rebuilding of encampment into permanent trading hub. Wirebridge freehold. Merchant caravans already anchored. Bakers sold rye loaves shaped like direwolves. Dornish vintners discovered northern nights cooled their reds into richer spice. Yet each evening, Jon climbed River Bluff and scanned southern horizon. Ghost's echo pulsed restless, sensing dragons below far skies. Luck curled at his feet, whining. On the 8th night, a star rained green streak across vault. Campfires flickered uneasy. Bran left Godswood, eyes wide. Threads tense. Dawn brings crossroad. Nenderwan. At midday horns sounded. Veraxis burst above ridge, roaring triumph. Shortly after, Drogon thundered in, landing before Jon. Daenerys slid down. Her tunic bore soot, but eyes shone bright. Belgrave's cell is ashen chain, she announced. His followers scattered. He drank his own Blackfire brew before capture. She offered Jon a steel cylinder whose surface shimmered with once forbidden runes. Blueprints for device to ensnare dragon souls. We seized it. She paused. Also found stockpile of eggs, 3 dormant, petrified but intact. Jon's pupils widened. Dragons unborn. She handed cylinder to Sam. Study, destroy, whichever guards peace. Jon looked at her, hair wild, cheeks smudged, and felt weight shift across future. Dragons now more than weapons, potential stewards of field and forge. How did Old Town greet sight of Drogon? Daenerys smiled. Children cheered. Bells rang, a different bell. Jon laughed, a raw honest bark that startled them both. He drew her into quick embrace. She stiffened, then melted fraction. Luck barked. Dragons rumbled approval. Months ripened into a green summer, seldom known so far north. Rolling barley replaced trampled grass. Willow shoots lined rebuilt piers. Cherry trees gifted by Dorne took root near Heart Tree. Their blossoms indeed paled dawn pink. Weirbridge freehold thrived, neutral ground where maester scribes penned truths beside stone children, casting obsidian jewelry for lovers celebrating new festivals. Tommen relocated his seat not to King's Landing's ruins, but to Harrenhal reborn as Library Citadel, choosing council by elected lords. Reach grain caravans fed ironborn fishermen who traded salted cod for timber from Bear Island. Sunset sea merchants paid in silver stags bearing a direwolf on reverse. Across all this wove dragons, never swooping low without herald, dropping sacks of river sand on parched fields, carrying builders to mountain passes once impassable. They became signs of restoration more than threat. Jon and Daenerys met each dawn beneath new budding cherry grove. Dole, he taught her to savor jam made from cloudberries. She taught him high Valyrian lullabies that stilled orphan dreams. Their conversations mapped regrets, hopes, the spaces in between. Love did not blaze. It smoldered like banked hearth. No grand declarations, just touch of fingers exchanging seed packets, shared laughter when Luck stole dried meat from Drogon's feed. The dragon egg quickened by Jon's bedside cracked one violet evening. Midwives of every creed gathered. The hatchling emerged midnight blue, eyes opal flecked. It squeaked, sneezed sparks, and crawled first, not to Jon or Daenerys, but to Bran under Hearttree, curling on his lap. It chooses wisdom first, Bran said, smiling. They named it Vesper, Starborn. Jon believed then fully, cycles can be broken, by stubborn hope, by wolves howling ghosts across death, by dragons returning not for conquest, but communion. And somewhere beyond, in silent snows where no man tread, a shimmering white wolf with red eyes watched northern lights dance, then turned south, spirit trotting the wind road home.